Hello everyone, I am Alex and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I should have known something was wrong the moment I first walked down that hallway. The rental price for a 3-bedroom house in San Francisco was too good to be true. But desperation makes you ignore red flags. Now 3 months later, I'm typing this from a motel room because I can spend another night in that place. I need to get this story out to make sense of what happened. It started in September when I found the listing on Craigslist. The location was perfect, walking distance to my new tech job, and the price was manageable if split with roommates. I met Mark and Steve through a housing Facebook group, and we clicked immediately. Both worked in tech too and seemed normal enough. Mark was a UI designer who spent most of his time rock climbing, while Steve was a back-end developer who played in a local band. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, was an elderly woman who lived across town. She showed us around the 1920s Victorian-style house one sunny afternoon. The place needed some work, peeling wallpaper in spots, squeaky floorboards, and that musty smell old houses get, but it had character with high ceilings and original hardwood floors. The layout was simple: living room and kitchen downstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs connected by a long hallway with a bathroom at the end. That hallway, even during the showing, I noticed how dark it was compared to the rest of the house. Mrs. Chen flipped a switch and the single overhead light cast weak, yellowish light that barely penetrated to gloom. I assumed the bulb needed changing. Previous tenants were good people, Mrs. Chen said as we signed the lease. They stayed 2 years, had to move suddenly for work. She hesitated for a moment. Sometimes old houses make noises, nothing to worry about. We moved in the following weekend. Mark took the bedroom nearest the stairs. Steve chose the middle room, and I got the one at the end next to the bathroom. The first few weeks were normal as we settled into our routines. During the day, sunlight streamed through the windows in all the rooms, except that hallway. No matter the time or weather, it remained unusually dark. I changed the bulb to a bright LED, but it didn't help much. The light seemed to stop a few feet from the fixture, as if the darkness was somehow thicker there. I told myself it was just shadows from the unusual angles of the walls, or maybe dark paint under the wallpaper absorbing the light. The first incident happened about a month after we moved in. I was coming back late from the office around 11 p.m. Mark was at his girlfriend's place. Steve was out with his band. As I walked down the hallway to my room, I heard it. A whisper so faint I almost missed it. Here I froze. The sound seemed to come from behind me, but when I turned around, the hallway was empty. Just my imagination, I told myself. I was tired, and old houses make weird noises. I hurried to my room and closed the door. The next few weeks it happened again. Always at night, always when I was alone in the house. Sometimes it was just unintelligible whispers, like someone muttering under their breath. Other times I caught fragments of words. Stay, watching, closer. I started avoiding going upstairs when I was alone. I'd stay in the living room until Mark or Steve got home, then casually head up with them. The whispers never came when they were around. I asked them if they'd heard anything strange in the hallway. Nah man, Mark said, not looking up from his phone. Just the usual old house creaks. Though the hallway is weirdly dark, Steve added. I've been meaning to add more lights. We installed 2 more wall sconces, but they had the same effect as the overhead lights. The brightness seemed to get swallowed up a few feet from the source. I started documenting everything. I set up my phone to record audio in the hallway while I was at work, but the recordings were always clean. I took photos, but they just showed a normal, if dimly lit, hallway. The whispers got more frequent. Then they got louder. One night in December, I was heading to the bathroom around 3 a.m. As I passed Steve's room, I heard it clearly. Don't you want to know why? I spun around, my heart pounding. The hallway was darker than usual, if that was possible. The lights were on, but they seemed dimmer and more distant. The darkness between them looked almost solid. I could have sworn I saw movement in it, like ripples in black water. Hello? I called out, my voice shaking. Is someone there? Silence. Then from right behind me, we've been waiting for you. I ran. I slammed my bedroom door and shoved my desk chair under the handle. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. In the morning, everything looked normal. Mark and Steve were eating breakfast, discussing weekend plans like nothing had happened. I started researching the house's history. The local library had archives of city records and newspapers going back decades. The house was built in 1924 by a merchant named George Sullivan. He lived there with his wife until his death in 1947. After that, it changed hands several times. Nothing unusual stood out. No deaths, no crimes, no mysterious disappearances. I tracked down Mrs. Chan's phone number and called her. The previous tenants, I said. Why did they really leave? She was quiet for a long moment. They said the house wasn't right for them. Did they mention anything about the hallway? About hearing things? Another pause. Old houses settle. Make noise. Nothing to worry about. Mrs. Chen, please. I need to know if they experienced anything unusual. She sighed. They say the hallway is too dark. They claim to hear things, but everyone hears strange noises in an old house. Wind in walls, pipes, normal sounds. Did anyone else experience anything like that? Other tenants before them. I must go now, she said quickly. Remember the lease agreement. No breaking the contract early. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked and a white noise machine running. I took the long way around outside to use the downstairs bathroom at night, but I couldn't avoid the hallway completely. My room had all my stuff, my workspace, my life. The whispering changed. It became more conversational, as if trying to engage me. We know you can hear us. Why do you ignore us? We just want to talk. You belong here. I began to notice other things. The darkness in the hallway seemed to move sometimes, shifting and flowing like slow smoke. The temperature would drop suddenly as I walked through. Cold spots that made my breath fog. Objects in my room would be slightly moved, not enough to be certain, but enough to make me doubt my sanity. I installed a motion-activated camera in the hallway. The first night, it recorded normally until 3:17 a.m. Then the image went black for exactly 6 minutes. When it came back on, nothing had changed. This happened 3 nights in a row. I showed the footage to Mark and Steve over breakfast. Dude, it's probably just a power fluctuation, Mark said. These old houses have weird electrical issues. The camera runs on batteries, and nothing else in the house loses power. Steve looked uncomfortable. Look, I know the hallway is creepy, but you're getting a bit obsessed. Maybe you should talk to someone. They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. They never heard the whispers, never saw the darkness move. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Last night was the final straw. I was working late in my room, headphones on. Around midnight, I felt a cold draft. I turned around and saw my door was open. I was sure I'd closed it. The hallway beyond was pitch black, darker than I'd ever seen it. The lights were on, but they looked like distant stars barely penetrating the darkness. Then I saw movement. The darkness wasn't flowing anymore. It was reaching, extending into my room like black tentacles. And in the center of it, I saw something, a deeper darkness, a void in the shape of a person. It had no features I could make out, but I felt it watching me. The whispers came from everywhere at once. Finally, come join us. You're ready now. Stay forever. I grabbed my laptop and phone, shoved them in my backpack, and ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car driving to this motel. I haven't been back. Mark texted me this morning. Where are you? Your door's locked and you're not answering. I told him I was taking a few personal days. He replied. Weird thing, the hallway seems brighter today. Steve noticed it too. I'm not going back to that house. We'll figure out the least situation later. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe there's a rational explanation for everything. But I know what I experienced in that hallway was real. The darkness was alive, aware, waiting. And it's still there, whispering to anyone who will listen. I've been researching similar experiences online. There are others who encountered strange darkness, who've heard whispers in old houses. Some say it's interdimensional beings. Others claim it's echoes of past events trapped in the walls. A few suggest these places are thin spots between our world and something else. I don't know what was in that hallway. I don't want to know. But I'm writing this down so there's a record. So the next person who encounters something like this knows they're not alone. And if you're house hunting in San Francisco and find it too good to be true, Victorian with a dark hallway, keep looking. The motel manager just knocked on my door. She said there's been a noise complaint. Someone heard whispering coming from my room, but I've been alone in here all night. I need to go now. I first saw it on a Tuesday night in October. I remember because I had just finished a 14-hour shift at the warehouse, and my back was killing me from moving boxes all day. The security light in my backyard clicked on as I walked past the kitchen window. That's when I noticed it, a dark figure standing motionless at the tree line, right where my yard meets the woods. I stopped mid-step, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my mouth. The figure was tall, maybe 6 feet, and completely still, standing there in the shadows between 2 oak trees. I couldn't make out any features. It was like looking at a person-shaped hole in the world. I set my mug down and moved closer to the window. The figure took a step backward, melting partially into the darkness between the trees. My heart started pounding against my ribs. I pressed my face against the cold glass, squinting to get a better look. The security light cast long shadows across the yard, but the figure was definitely there, halfway hidden now. I grabbed my phone and the biggest flashlight I own, one of those heavy metal ones that could double as a weapon. My hands shook as I unlocked the back door. The autumn air hid my face, carrying the smell of dead leaves and damp earth. I stepped onto the deck, my work boots loud against the wooden boards. "Hey," I shouted. My voice sounded thin in the open air. "This is private property." The figure retreated another step. Now I could barely see it, just a slightly darker patch of shadow among the trees. I switched on the flashlight and swept the beam across the tree line. Nothing. Just tree trunks, fallen leaves, and empty spaces between. My breath came out in white puffs in the cold air. I walked down the deck steps, the flashlight beam bouncing with each movement. The security light hummed above me, creating a circle of harsh brightness. Beyond that circle, the darkness seemed even deeper. I made it halfway across the yard before stopping. Every instinct screamed at me to go back inside. That's when I saw it move again, just a slight shift to the left, staying in the shadows. My throat went dry. I took another step forward, and it retreated deeper into the woods. The movement was smooth, almost liquid. No sound of footsteps, no rustling leaves, just silent, fluid motion. I backed up slowly until I hit the deck steps, then turned and hurried inside. I locked the door, checked it twice, then closed all the blinds. I spent the rest of the night in my recliner facing the back windows, flashlight in my lap. Sleep wasn't happening. The next morning, I searched the tree line. The ground was wet with dew, but I couldn't find any footprints, no broken branches, no disturbed leaves. Nothing to prove what I'd seen was real. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it too many long shifts, too much caffeine, too little sleep. Then Wednesday night came. Same routine, late shift, aching back, coffee mug in hand. I deliberately kept my eyes away from the kitchen window as I heated up a frozen dinner. But curiosity won. I had to look. It was there. Same spot, same stillness. My TV dinner fell to the floor, plastic tray clattering against tile. The figure didn't react to the noise. It just stood there, a dark cutout against the trees. This time I didn't go outside. I watched it through the window for hours. It watched me back. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt them. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every night it appeared. Always at the edge of the yard, always retreating if I got too close. I started taking photos with my phone, but they came out blurry or too dark. I set up a security camera, but the footage showed only indistinct shadows. My neighbor Rick thought I was losing it. Probably just a deer, he said when I tried to explain. They freeze up in the light sometimes, but I've seen plenty of deer. This wasn't that deer move differently, and they make noise. This thing, whatever it was, moved like smoke and made no sound at all. I called the police on Sunday. Officer Martinez came out, walked the property, took notes. She was professional, but I could see the look in her eyes. The same look Rick had given me. This guy's cracking up. She suggested I trim back the trees to let in more light. Said maybe local teens were playing pranks, but teens would get bored after a few nights. Teens would laugh or run or leave footprints in the mud. This presence was different, patient, consistent. It had a purpose, but I couldn't figure out what it was. The lack of sleep started affecting my work. I dropped a crate of inventory on Tuesday, nearly broke my foot. My supervisor sent me home early. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes staring at the trees before I worked up the nerve to go inside. That night, I decided to wait it out. I set up a chair on my deck, wrapped in my warmest coat. 2 thermoses of coffee sat beside me. A flashlight rested in my lap, phone fully charged. I was going to sit there until sunrise if I had to. The security light clicked on at 8:43 p.m. I checked my phone to mark the time, and there it was, right on schedule, standing between the same two oak trees. In the 2 weeks since this started, it had never deviated from that spot. "What do you want?" I called out. My voice was steady now. Fear had given way to frustration, to anger. "Why are you here?" No response, no movement, just that patient watching stillness. At 11:17 p.m., I heard a sound for the first time, a soft scraping like dry leaves being dragged across concrete. The figure shifted slightly, and I realized the sound was coming from it. My hands gripped the flashlight so hard my knuckles went white. The scraping got louder. The figure took a step forward, the first time it had ever moved toward me instead of away. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every muscle tensed, ready to run. Now it was fully in the open, no longer hidden by trees. The security light should have illuminated it, but somehow the darkness clung to its form. It was like looking at a tear in reality, a piece of the night that had decided to stand up and walk. The scraping sound grew until it filled my ears. My teeth vibrated with it. The figure took another step. Another. It was halfway across the yard now. I raised the flashlight, my finger on the switch, but I couldn't make myself turn it on. Some animal part of my brain knew that I didn't want to see this thing clearly. I stood up. The chair clattered behind me. My legs shook. The figure stopped moving, the scraping cutting off suddenly, leaving a ringing silence. We stood there, maybe 20 feet apart, in some kind of standoff. Then it raised an arm. The movement was wrong, too fluid, too many angles. Like watching a time-lapse video of a plant growing but in reverse. The arm kept extending, reaching longer than any human arm could be, toward me across the yard. I ran, slammed through the door, locked it, ran upstairs to my bedroom, collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. I didn't look out the window again that night. The next morning I called in sick to work, spent the day installing more security lights, clearing brush, cutting back tree branches, anything to reduce the shadows. I bought more cameras, motion sensors, even an electric fence system. None of it mattered. The figure appeared again that night, standing in its usual spot despite the floodlights and cleared vegetation. The cameras caught nothing but static. The motion sensors never triggered. The electric fence might as well have been unplugged. But something had changed. Now it would take steps forward sometimes, always stopping halfway across the yard, always raising that impossible arm, always retreating back to the trees if I went inside or looked away. I started sleeping during the day and staying awake all night. I ordered blackout curtains for my bedroom windows, bought caffeine pills, made spreadsheets tracking the figure's appearances, its movements, the sounds it made. I needed to understand it, needed to find a pattern, a reason, anything that made sense. Week 3, I lost my job, missed too many shifts, made too many mistakes when I did show up. Rick stops coming by to check on me. Officer Martinez didn't return my calls. I couldn't blame them. I knew how I sounded. The figure grew bolder. Each night it came a little closer before retreating. The scraping sound got louder, developed layers. Sometimes I thought I could hear words in it, but they were in no language I recognized. I stopped going outside completely, ordered groceries delivered, kept the blinds closed. But I could feel it out there, waiting. The air in the house grew thick and stale. The walls seemed to press in closer each day. 4 weeks in, I cracked. Sleep deprivation, isolation, and fear had worn me down to nothing. I sat on my kitchen floor at 3 a.m., listening to that endless scraping sound, and made a decision. This had to end. I grabbed my flashlight and coat, walked out onto the deck. The figure stood in its usual spot, arm already rising in that plant growth motion. I took a deep breath and started walking toward it. It didn't retreat this time. The scraping got louder with each step I took. My ears popped, my vision blurred at the edges. But I kept walking, 10 feet away now. I could see more details, though my mind struggled to process them. The darkness wasn't clinging to the figure, it was part of it, moving and flowing like black water running upward. 5 feet. The arms stretched toward me, too long, too many joints. The scraping filled the world. My nose started bleeding. 3 feet, 2, 1. I stopped, raised my flashlight, thumb on the switch. The figure lowered its arm. The scraping cut off. In the sudden silence, I heard something like breathing, but not from the figure, from behind me. I turned around slowly. There was another figure standing on my deck, identical to the first. It raised its arm. And another figure stepped out from behind a tree to my left. Another emerged from behind my garden shed. More appeared at the tree line, 2, 5, a dozen. Each one the same impossible shape, each one with an arm reaching toward me. I stood perfectly still, surrounded by a circle of darkness given form. My flashlight slipped from numb fingers and hit the ground with a dull thud. The figures took a synchronized step forward. Another. The scraping sound started again, coming from all directions now. A chorus of dry leaves, concrete, and something else. Something hungry. I closed my eyes, felt the air move as those two long arms reached for me, waiting for whatever came next. "Kevin! Hey, Kevin!" Rick's voice cut through the sound. A car door slammed, footsteps on gravel. I opened my eyes. The figures were gone. Just my backyard, empty and bright under the security lights. Rick stood at the side gate, holding a paper bag. He called out, "Brought you some dinner. You haven't been answering your phone. We're worried about you, man." I looked around. No dark figures, no scraping sound. Just crickets, distant traffic. "Come on inside," I said. My voice sounded strange in my ears. "It's not safe out here after dark." Rick gave me an odd look, but followed me in. I locked the door behind us. I checked it twice. "You look like hell," he said, unpacking containers of Chinese food. "When's the last time you slept?" I didn't answer, just walked to the kitchen window and closed the blinds. I didn't need to look outside. I knew they were out there waiting in the shadows, waiting for me to be alone again. Rick stayed for 2 hours. We ate, we talked about normal things. Work, sports, his kids. He pretended not to notice how I flinched at every sound from outside. When he left, I walked him to his car, stood in the driveway until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, locked up, and started packing. The next morning, I called my sister in Arizona. She had a spare room, she said. Plenty of sun there, not many trees. No shadows for things to hide in. I hired movers, left most of my furniture behind, drove west with just what would fit in my car. Didn't look back until Ohio was 3 states behind me. That was 6 months ago. The apartment complex where I live now is all concrete and stucco. My windows face east, catching the desert sunrise. I work day shifts at a local warehouse, sleep with the lights on. Sometimes I check the local news back home, looking for stories about missing people or strange sightings near my old house. Nothing so far. The new owners moved in last month. I think about calling them, warning them, but I know how it would sound. Besides, maybe it was all in my head. Stress, exhaustion, isolation, playing tricks on my mind. That's what the therapist I started seeing says. She's probably right, but I still don't go out after dark. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I hear something that might be scraping, like dry leaves on concrete coming from just outside my window. I keep the blinds closed. I don't want to know if there's anything out there reaching for me with 2 long arms. I don't want to know if they followed me here. I don't want to know if they're still waiting. The first time I found my mother's medallion hanging on the wall, I blamed my girlfriend Sarah. It made sense. She was the only other person with a key to my apartment. But when I called to ask her about it, she was confused. She hadn't been to my place in over a week. That's when the unease first crept in. I stood there in my bedroom, phone still in hand, staring at the brass medallion, swaying slightly on a nail that I knew for certain hadn't been there the night before. The morning light caught its surface, making the intricate Celtic knotwork pattern seem to shift and move. I've kept that medallion in the top drawer of my bedside table for the past 15 years, ever since Mom passed away. It was the last thing she gave me, pressing it into my palm as she lay in her hospital bed. "Keep it safe," Shed said. Those were her last words to me, and I had kept it safe, tucked away in that drawer where I could see it every morning and night. Sometimes I'd hold it, feeling the weight of the metal and tracing the patterns with my finger, but I never hung it up. I never wanted to risk losing it. Now here it was on my wall, about eye level, like some kind of museum piece on display. I walked over and lifted it carefully off the nail. The metal was cool against my skin. I examined the nail. It looked old, as if it had been there for years. But I knew my walls. I painted this room myself just last summer. There hadn't been any nails. I dropped the medallion back into its drawer and got ready for work, trying to shake off the weird feeling. By lunchtime, I'd almost convinced myself that I must have hung it up myself and forgotten about it. The mind plays tricks sometimes, especially in the morning when you're still half asleep. That night, I made sure the medallion was secure in its drawer before going to bed. I even went so far as to take a picture with my phone, showing the medallion nestled among my spare charging cables and old receipts, just to prove to myself where I'd left it. The next morning, it was back on the wall. This time I knew I wasn't imagining things. The nail was in a different spot, about 6 inches to the left of where it had been the day before. I yanked the medallion down so hard that the chain tangled. My heart was pounding as I examined the wall. The nail from yesterday was gone. No hole, no mark, nothing to show it had ever been there. I called in sick to work and spent the morning going over my apartment, inch by inch, looking for any sign of a break-in. The deadbolt was secure, the windows were all locked, with no scratches around the locks or scuff marks on the sills. Nothing was missing or disturbed except for that damn medallion. Sarah came over that evening after I texted her about what was happening. She could tell I was rattled. I'd barely slept the night before, jumping at every small sound in my apartment. Maybe you should have it appraised, she suggested, turning the medallion over in her hands. Find out more about where it came from. Mom never told me much about it, I said. Just that it was a family heirloom, passed down through her side of the family. Well, clearly there's more to it than that. Sarah held it up to the lights. These symbols look Celtic, but there's something off about them, and feel how heavy it is for its size. She was right, the medallion was about 2 inches across, but weighed as much as a heavy paperweight. The metal wasn't quite brass or gold, but something in between. And the patterns, looking at them too long made my eyes hurt, like trying to follow a line in an Escher drawing. I'm going to put it somewhere more secure, I told her, just until I can figure out what's going on. There was a small safe bolted to the floor of my closet. I usually just kept some emergency cash and important documents in there, but that night I cleared a space and placed the medallion inside. Sarah watched as I spun the dial, checking it 3 times to make sure it was locked. Call me if anything else weird happens, she said as she left. I could tell she was worried about me, probably thinking I was having some kind of breakdown. I'd barely slept that night, lying awake listening to every creak and settling sound in my apartment. Around 3 a.m., I got up to check the safe. The medallion was still there, gleaming dully in the beam of my phone's flashlight. When I woke up the next morning, the medallion was on my pillow, less than an inch from my face. I scrambled out of bed so fast I got tangled in the sheets and fell, cracking my elbow on the nightstand. The pain helped ground me and made this feel more real. The medallion lay there on my white pillowcase, the chain coiled like a small snake. The safe was still locked. I opened it with shaking hands. The cash was there, my passport, birth certificate, everything except the medallion. I called Sarah again, but it went to voicemail. Then I called my boss and told him I needed to take the rest of the week off. Family emergency. It wasn't exactly a lie. I spent the next few hours online searching for information about Celtic medallions, family heirlooms, and unexplained movements of objects. Most of what I found was obviously fake, ghost stories and paranormal message boards. But one site caught my attention, a scholarly article about Celtic artifacts, specifically focusing on objects with unusual properties. The author mentioned something called a wanderer's token, a type of medallion that supposedly couldn't be contained or constrained. According to legend, these tokens would always return to their rightful place, no matter how they were secured. The article was frustratingly vague about what constituted a rightful place or why these tokens existed. I was deep in my research when my phone buzzed. Sarah had texted back, coming over after work. Don't do anything crazy. I spent the rest of the day watching the medallion. I'd placed it on my coffee table right in the center. It didn't move. No mysterious nails appeared in my walls. It just sat there, looking like any other piece of old jewelry. Sarah arrived around 6 p.m. with takeout and a determined expression. Okay, she said, setting down the bags of Chinese food. Tell me everything that's happened in order. Don't leave anything out. I walked her through it while she took notes on her phone. The first appearance on the wall, the second morning, different nail, the safe, the pillow. And you're sure you didn't sleepwalk or anything? She asked. Maybe take any medication that might cause memory issues. I'm sure, I said. Look at the safe yourself. It's still locked, with no signs of tampering. And I checked my security cameras. Nothing shows anyone coming in or out of my apartment. She frowned at her notes. What about your mom? Did she ever say anything about the medallion being special? I thought back to those last days in the hospital. Mom had been in and out of lucidity, with the pain medication making her drift. But when she gave me the medallion, her eyes had been clear. Keep it safe. I repeated her words. But maybe she didn't mean keep it safe in a drawer, or a safe. Maybe she meant something else. Sarah picked up the medallion from the coffee table. It feels different, she said. Warmer than it should be. She was right. The metal had always been cool to the touch before, but now it was almost body temperature. As we watched, the chain began to move on its own, slithering through Sarah's fingers like liquid metal. She dropped it with a yelp. The medallion hit the carpet with a dull thud, much louder than it should have been for its size. We both stared at it, but it didn't move again. Okay, Sarah said after a long moment. This is real. This is actually happening. I picked up the medallion. It was cool again. I need to find out more about my mom's family. She never talked much about them, saying they were all gone. But maybe there's something in her old papers. I had a box of mom's things in my storage unit. Tax records, old photos, letters, stuff I hadn't looked at since she died. Sarah helped me bring it up to my apartment. We spent the next few hours going through everything. Most of it was ordinary stuff. Birthday cards, utility bills, recipes clipped from magazines. But at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, we found a small leather-bound book. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with handwritten notes in different styles of handwriting. Some entries were in English, others in what looked like Gaelic. Dates went back over 100 years. It's a journal, Sarah said, carefully turning the pages. Look, they're all writing about the medallion. She was right. Entry after entry mentioned the token or the wanderer. Some wrote about trying to sell it, only to have it reappear in their homes. Others described attempts to destroy it, all unsuccessful. One writer claimed to have dropped it into the ocean, only to find it hanging around their neck the next morning. This is crazy, I said, running my hands through my hair. This can't be real. It's real, Sarah said quietly. We've both seen it move. The question is, what do we do about it? We read more of the journal. The most recent entry was from my mother, dated a few months before she died. The token has chosen James. I've seen how it responds to him even now. I hope he'll understand when the time comes. The weight of carrying it isn't a burden, but a responsibility, a connection to something older and deeper than we can comprehend. James, if you're reading this, trust it. Trust yourself. I looked at the medallion still lying innocently on my coffee table. As if in response, it vibrated slightly, the chain clinking against the glass surface. She knew, I said. She knew this would happen. Sarah squeezed my hand. What do you want to do? I picked up the medallion. It felt warm again, but not uncomfortably so. More like it was responding to my touch. The Celtic patterns seemed clearer now, less dizzying to look at. For the first time, I noticed that they formed a continuous line, weaving over and under itself endlessly. I'm going to do what Mom said. I'm going to trust it. I found a nail in my toolbox and picked a spot on my bedroom wall, the same height where the medallion had first appeared. The nail went in easily, like the wall had been waiting for it. I hung the medallion carefully, making sure the chain wasn't tangled. There, I said, stepping back, where you want to be. That night I slept better than I had in days. When I woke up, the medallion was still hanging on the wall, catching the morning light. It looked right there, like it had always been meant to be in that spot. Over the next few weeks, the medallion stayed put. No more mysterious movements, no appearances on my pillow. Sometimes I'd catch it swaying slightly, even when there was no breeze in the room. Other times I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see it glowing faintly, the patterns throwing strange shadows on the wall. I kept reading the journal, learning more about my family's history with the token. The stories went back generations, each keeper adding their own experiences. Some wrote about the medallion guiding them away from danger. Others described dreams where the patterns showed them things, places they needed to go, or people they needed to meet. Sarah helped me translate some of the Gaelic entries, which were older, dating back to when the token first came into my family's possession. The writer spoke of it as a gift from the old ones, meant to forge a connection between worlds, not as something to be locked away, but as something to be lived with and learned from. I started having the dreams too. Nothing dramatic, just glimpses of the patterns moving, forming shapes that seemed meaningful in the moment but faded upon waking. Sometimes I get sudden urges to go somewhere or do something, and when I followed these impulses, they usually led to something interesting or important. Like the day I felt compelled to take a different route to work and ended up preventing a car accident. Or the time I was drawn to a small bookstore I'd never noticed before and found a collection of Celtic histories that helped me understand more about the medallion's origins. The token wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It had just been trying to show me where it belonged, not hidden away in a drawer or locked in a safe, but out in the open, where it could do what it was meant to do. Mom's last words made sense now. Keep it safe hadn't meant to protect it. It had meant keep it free to move, to guide, to connect. The medallion was safe as long as it was allowed to be what it was. Sarah moved in with me 6 months later. She said she had gotten used to the medallion's presence, and even found it comforting. Sometimes she'd talk to it, especially when she had a big decision to make. It's like having a very quiet, very old roommate, she joked. The medallion still moves sometimes, but not to escape anymore. Now it shifts position when something's about to happen, turning to face the door before we get unexpected visitors or angling itself toward the window before a storm. Once it fell off its nail entirely, and that same day we discovered a gas leak in the building that could have been dangerous. I've started making my own entries in the journal, adding my experiences to those of my ancestors. Someday I'll pass both the journal and the medallion on to someone else in my family when the token shows me it's time. But for now it seems content to stay where it is, hanging on my bedroom wall, quietly watching over our lives. The weight of carrying it isn't a burden, Mom wrote. She was right about that too. It's not a burden at all, it's a gift. A reminder that there are still mysteries in the world, things that can't be explained or contained. Sometimes the best thing we can do is accept them, learn from them, and let them guide us where they will. Every morning when I wake up, I look at the medallion on my wall. Sometimes it seems to shine a little brighter, as if saying good morning back. And every night before I sleep, I whisper the same words my mother wrote in her final entry. Trust it, trust yourself. And I do. The old rotary phone sits on my bedroom nightstand. It's been there since my grandfather passed away last month. Just another memento I couldn't bring myself to throw away from his house. The cream-colored plastic has yellowed with age, and the metal dial makes a satisfying click, click, click when you spin it. I kept it purely for nostalgia. It's not even plugged in. That's why the ringing jolted me awake at 3:17 a.m. last Tuesday. The harsh mechanical bell sound cut through the darkness, making me sit bolt upright in bed. My heart pounded against my ribs as I stared at the phone, trying to process what I was hearing. The ringing continued. 2 short bursts. Pause, repeat, the same pattern I remembered from childhood visits to my grandparents' house. This is impossible, I muttered, reaching for the lamp switch. Warm light flooded the room. The phone kept ringing. I picked up the handset. My palms were sweaty against the plastic. Hello. Static crackled in my ear, along with something else, a soft wheezing sound. Then I heard it clearly. Laughter. Not joyful or friendly laughter, but a weak, breathy chuckle that made the hair on my arm stand up. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds before the line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, listening to silence. My hands shook as I set it back in the cradle. I picked up the cord and followed it to where it disappeared behind the nightstand. When I pulled it out, the end was frayed and broken, just as I'd known it would be. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the phone had stored charge in its capacitor somehow. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing, until it happened again the next night. This time, the ringing started at 3:21 a.m. I lay there for several rings, watching the phone vibrate slightly with each bell. Finally, I reached for it. What was this? I demanded. The static was louder this time. The laughter came in stronger too. Still that same wheezing chuckle, but there were multiple voices now, echoing and overlapping to create a chorus of mirthless sound that made my stomach turn. It lasted longer than before, maybe 15 seconds. When it stopped, I slammed the phone down. My hands were trembling so badly I had to grip the edge of the nightstand to steady them. Sweat had soaked through my t-shirt. I spent the next day researching old phones, looking for any explanation. Could it be picking up radio signals, crosstalk from nearby lines? Nothing I found made sense. That evening, I took the phone apart completely. The internal components were dusty, but intact. No battery, no power source. No way it could possibly ring. I left the pieces scattered across my desk. "Try ringing now," I muttered. At 3:24 a.m., the bell sound jerked me awake. The dismantled phone lay in pieces, but the ringing came through clear as ever. The handset sat amid the scattered components, its cord severed. My voice shook as I picked it up. "What do you want?" The static burst through immediately, along with that horrible laughter. More voices had joined the chorus. They seemed to be getting closer, as if the laughers were pressing their mouths right up to my ear. The sound filled my head until I could barely think. My whole body went cold as one voice rose above the others. A wet, gurgling chuckle that couldn't have come from human vocal cords. I hurled the handset across the room. It smashed against the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster. The laughter cut off instantly. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I gathered the phone pieces into a garbage bag. I drove to the dumpster behind my apartment building and threw it in. Then I sat in my car until sunrise, afraid to go back inside. The next night I stayed at a hotel. I took a sleeping pill and passed out watching TV. The bedside phone woke me at 3:27 a.m. I knew before I answered what I would hear. The static came first, then the laughter, but now it was thunderous. Dozens of voices cackling and howling with glee. They seemed to be celebrating something. One voice called out words I couldn't quite make out, and the others responded with renewed peals of laughter that made my ears ring. I slammed the phone down and ran out of the room. The night clerk looked alarmed as I burst into the lobby. "Sir, is everything all right?" he asked. "The phone in my room? Who's calling it?" He checked his computer. "There are no external lines connected to the rooms right now," he said. "We're upgrading our phone system. The phones are just decorative at the moment." I drove home in a daze, the sun rising by the time I pulled into my parking spot. I hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. My hands shook as I unlocked my apartment door. The old rotary phone sat on my nightstand, fully assembled, looking exactly as it had when I first brought it from my grandfather's house. I backed out of the bedroom and closed the door. After a moment's thought, I wedged a chair under the handle. Then I collapsed on the couch and called in sick to work. That afternoon, I drove to my grandfather's old house. It had been sold, but I found the new owners outside doing yard work. We were a friendly, middle-aged couple who invited me in when I explained who I was. "Actually," the husband said, "we had a question about the phone lines." The inspector had noted some unusual wiring in the walls, but they hadn't had a chance to look into it. He led me to my grandfather's old study. The wood-paneled walls had been painted a cheerful yellow, but otherwise the room looked the same. He pointed to a panel behind where the desk used to be. "See these markings? They don't match any standard phone wiring diagrams." I knelt down to look closer. Carved into the wood around the phone were dozens of tiny symbols. Circles and lines arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. They formed a complete ring around the outlet. "Your grandfather wasn't into any kind of occult stuff, was he?" she asked hesitantly. "We found similar markings in other rooms." "Always around the phone, Jax." I shook my head slowly. "Not that I knew of." He was a telephone engineer, though. Worked for the phone company his whole life. "Huh." He scratched his head. "Well, we're planning to update all the wiring anyway. Thanks for stopping by." I sat in my car for a long time after leaving, thinking about my grandfather. He'd never seemed interested in anything supernatural, but I remembered how he always insisted on having phones in every room, even after everyone switched to cell phones. How he checked the lines obsessively, testing connections and replacing cords. How he would sometimes sit in his study late at night, just holding the handset to his ear. What had he been listening for? That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, watching the bedroom door. At 3:30 a.m. exactly, the ringing started. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound cut through clearly. After 12 rings, it stopped. Then the laughter began seeping under the door, loud enough now that I didn't need a handset to hear it. The voices had taken on a frenzied quality, like they were building towards something. The chair juddered against the doorknob as something made the whole room vibrate. A new sound joined the cacophony, a series of clicks and pops, like someone rapidly dialing numbers. The laughter reached a fever pitch. Static filled the air, making my skin tingle. The lights flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard the bedroom door swing open. The static grew overwhelming, like a physical pressure against my eardrum. The laughter surrounded me now, coming from every corner of the room. Through the noise, I finally made out words. Wrong number, wrong number, wrong number. The voices howled with glee. My vision swam as the pressure built. Just before I passed out, I saw the old rotary phone floating in the center of the room, its cord writhing like a live wire, dial spinning wildly. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor said my neighbors found me unconscious in the hallway outside my apartment. They diagnosed me with extreme exhaustion and held me for observation. When I got home 2 days later, the phone was gone. In its place was a note written in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. They keep trying to call through. I held them back as long as I could. Your grandmother and I both did. I'm sorry, I should have destroyed the phones before I passed them on. They'll find someone else to dial now. Just remember, never answer a call after midnight. Never give them a connection. They only need one voice to open the line. I moved out of that apartment and changed my phone number. I don't have a landline anymore. Sometimes late at night I still hear phantom ringing or catch echoes of that terrible laughter. But as long as I don't answer, as long as I don't complete the connection, I know I'm safe. But I worry about all those other phones out there. All those obsolete landlines gathering dust in homes and offices. All those people who might pick up when they hear that first ring in the dead of night. So I'm sharing this warning. If an unconnected phone starts ringing after midnight, don't answer it. Don't give them a voice on this side of the line. They're dialing randomly, desperately, endlessly, and they only need one person to pick up. Let it ring. The first time I noticed something wrong with the grandfather clock was on a Tuesday evening in October. I was sitting in my living room trying to focus on some work emails when the deep resonant chimes that had been a constant backdrop to my life for the past 15 years suddenly stopped mid-strike. The silence caught my attention immediately. I looked up from my laptop screen to see the clock's hands frozen at 11:58 p.m. That was strange, since it was only 7:43 p.m. according to my phone. I got up from my leather armchair, walked over to the towering mahogany timepiece, and opened the glass door protecting its face. The brass hands felt cool under my fingers as I adjusted them to the correct time. As soon as I closed the door, the familiar tick-tock resumed, and I went back to my work. 20 minutes later, the chimes rang out again. Midnight. I frowned and checked my phone. It was 8:03 p.m. The clock's hands were back at 12 o'clock, despite my adjustment. Must be a mechanical issue, I thought, making a mental note to call a repair service in the morning. I reset the time again, this time paying closer attention to the mechanism. The clock had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down from my grandfather to my father, and then to me when Dad moved to his retirement condo in Florida. I'd always maintained it meticulously, having it serviced every few years by a specialist. It had never malfunctioned before. The next morning, I found the clock stuck at midnight again. This time, something else caught my eye. Thin scratches across the clock face that I was certain hadn't been there before. They weren't deep, but they were definitely new, creating a strange pattern around the number 12. My finger traced the marks, feeling their slight indentation in the otherwise smooth surface. I called the clock repair shop downtown and described the problem to the owner, an elderly man named Frank, who had serviced the clock before. He seemed puzzled by my description and agreed to come take a look the following day. That night, I decided to stay up and watch the clock. I set up my laptop on the coffee table, made a strong cup of coffee, and settled in for what I expected to be a boring evening of catch-up work while keeping an eye on the timepiece. The hands moved normally until 11:57 p.m. At that point, the tick-tock rhythm changed. It became slower and heavier somehow. The sound reminded me of footsteps on old wooden stairs. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The minute hand crawled toward midnight with agonizing slowness. At 11:59, the pendulum swing became erratic. Instead of its usual steady arc, it swung in irregular patterns, sometimes wide and sometimes narrow. The sound it made changed too. No longer the familiar tick-tock, but a grinding, scraping noise that set my teeth on edge. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair as I watched, unable to look away. The second hand twitched and jerked its way around the face. When it finally reached 12, the clock didn't chime. Instead, it made a sound like someone dragging their nails across a chalkboard. The hands spun backward rapidly, whirling counterclockwise until they stopped again at midnight. I jumped up and approached the clock, my heart pounding in my chest. New scratches had appeared on the face, deeper than before. They formed a pattern that looked almost like words, but in no alphabet I recognized. My fingers shook as I reached out to touch them. The glass was ice cold. I pulled my hand back quickly and stepped away from the clock. The pendulum had stopped moving entirely, but there was still a sound coming from inside the case, a low vibrating hum that made my fillings ache. The air around the clock seemed to waver like heat rising from hot pavement. I spent the rest of the night on my couch, watching the clock from across the room. It remained frozen at midnight, the strange hum continuing until sunrise, when it suddenly stopped and resumed its normal operation, as if nothing had happened. Frank arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. He was a short man with thick glasses and hands that showed years of detailed work. I explained what had happened while he examined the clock face carefully. "These marks," he said, adjusting his glasses. "They're unusual. The pattern suggests they were made from inside the clock, not outside." "That's impossible," I said. "There's nothing inside that could make marks like that." Frank opened the clock case and began examining the mechanism. His expression grew more concerned as he worked. "The gears are all in perfect condition," he said. "Better than perfect, actually. They show no wear at all, which is impossible for a clock this old." He pulled out a small magnifying glass and leaned in closer. "And these scratches, they're not random. They form a specific pattern that repeats. See here." He pointed to a series of marks that curved around the number 12. "This section appears exactly the same 4 times around the dial." I leaned in to look where he was pointing, and he was right. The scratches formed a precise geometric pattern that I hadn't noticed before. My stomach tightened as I realized they hadn't been there that morning. They were fresh. Frank continued his examination, opening panels and checking mechanisms I didn't even know existed. After about an hour, he sat back on his heels and wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "In 35 years of repairing clocks, I've never seen anything like this," he said. "Mechanically, everything is perfect. Too perfect. But these marks," he shook his head. "I can't explain them. And there's something else." He reached into the case and carefully extracted a small object. It was a piece of paper yellowed with age, folded into a tight square and wedged between 2 gears. The paper was covered in the same strange markings that were scratched into the clock face. "This was hidden inside," Frank said, holding it out to me. "It looks old, but it couldn't have been there longer. It would have jammed the mechanism." I took the paper carefully. The marks seemed to shift slightly as I looked at them, like they were moving on the page. My head started to throb, and I quickly set the paper down on the coffee table. Frank packed up his tools slowly, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. "I can't fix what isn't broken," he said, "but I'd recommend having someone else look at it. Someone who specializes in unusual cases." After he left, I sat staring at the clock in silence. The ticking seemed louder now, more insistent. I picked up the piece of paper again, forcing myself to study the marks despite the headache they caused. They reminded me of something I'd seen before, but I couldn't quite place it. I spent the afternoon researching clockmakers and mysterious markings online, but found nothing that matched what I was seeing. As evening approached, my anxiety grew. The ticking of the clock seemed to fill the entire house, drowning out all other sounds. At 11:57 p.m., I was ready. I had set up a video camera on a tripod, pointed directly at the clock face. My phone was recording audio. I sat in my chair watching through the camera's viewfinder as the minute hand approached 12. The same sequence of events began. The slowing tick-tock, the dropping temperature, the erratic pendulum. But this time, something new happened. As the second hand reached 12, the marks on the clock face began to glow with a faint blue light. The humming sound started again, but it was different this time. It had a pattern to it, almost like speech. The paper on the coffee table vibrated in response to the sound, the marks on it glowing with the same blue light as the clock face. Suddenly, my video camera shut off. My phone screen went black. The room plunged into darkness, except for the glowing marks on the clock and the paper. The humming grew louder, and I felt pressure building in my ears. The clock case door swung open on its own. The pendulum had stopped moving, but the space behind it seemed darker than it should be, like it opened into something deeper than the case should allow. The blue glow from the marks cast strange shadows that moved in ways that shadows shouldn't. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. The humming had become a physical force, pressing against my skin. The marks on the paper began to rearrange themselves, forming patterns that my eyes couldn't quite focus on. Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The lights came back on. My electronics restarted. The clock resumed its normal ticking, the hands showing the correct time, 12:01 a.m. The marks on both the clock face and the paper had stopped glowing, but they had changed. They now formed a clear message in English. Time is not linear. The door is opening. I spent the rest of the night researching those words online, looking for any similar experiences or explanations. I found nothing concrete, but I did discover some interesting discussions about time anomalies and dimensional physics. The more I read, the more I began to understand that what I was experiencing might be beyond traditional mechanical malfunction. The next day, I called several universities, trying to find someone who might be interested in studying the phenomenon. Most dismissed me immediately, but one physics professor, Dr. Sarah Chen, agreed to come take a look. She arrived that afternoon with a bag full of equipment. Dr. Chen spent several hours taking readings and measurements. Her instruments showed strange energy patterns around the clock, particularly near the marks on its face. The temperature around the clock was consistently 3 degrees colder than the rest of the room, even in direct sunlight. "These readings are fascinating," she said, studying a display on one of her devices. "There's a consistent pattern of electromagnetic disturbance centered on the clock, but it doesn't match any known form of energy emission. And these marks," she traced them with a finger, "they're not scratches in the traditional sense. The material hasn't been removed or displaced. It's been altered at a molecular level." As evening approached, Dr. Chen set up more sophisticated monitoring equipment. She was particularly interested in the period just before midnight. At 11:57, the familiar sequence began again. This time, her equipment captured everything: the temperature drop, the electromagnetic fluctuations, and the strange audio frequencies. As midnight struck, the blue glow appeared again, but her instruments showed something else: a distortion in the space around the clock, like a ripple in reality itself. "This is incredible," she whispered, staring at her readings. "These patterns are similar to theoretical models of temporal distortion. It's as if the clock is creating a localized time anomaly." The paper on the coffee table began to vibrate again. New marks appeared on both it and the clock face, gradually forming into another message: "The convergence approaches. 3 days remain." Dr. Chen's equipment went haywire and then shut down completely. The room returned to normal, but the message remained. She packed up her equipment quickly, promising to return the next day with more specialized instruments. I couldn't sleep that night. The clock's ticking seemed to follow me through the house, even in rooms far from the living room. The paper remained on the coffee table, its marks seemingly shifting when viewed from the corner of my eye. The next morning, I called my father. I needed to know more about the clock's history. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful as always. "The clock," he said. When I asked, "It was your grandfather's pride and joy. He got it from an estate sale back in 1947, never told us much about where it came from originally." But he paused. There was something odd about it. "Your grandfather used to say that it helped him make important decisions. Said it showed him things sometimes. In the reflections on the glass. We all thought he was just being dramatic. Did anything unusual ever happen with it? Any mechanical issues?" "Well, there was one thing. About a month before he died, he called me in a panic. He said the clock was trying to tell him something important. I drove over to check on him, but everything seemed normal. The clock was working fine. He never mentioned it again. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing." Dr. Chen arrived an hour later with new equipment. She spent the day taking more readings and consulting with colleagues via video calls. The marks on the clock face had multiplied overnight, spreading in intricate patterns across the entire dial. As midnight approached again, we were both ready. The sequence began as before, but this time the blue glow was brighter and the humming had a different quality, more urgent, more intense. The space behind the pendulum seemed to stretch impossibly deep. New marks appeared, forming another message. 2 days until the paths align. The choice must be made. Dr. Chen's new equipment captured even more data. The spatial distortion around the clock was stronger, creating what she called a temporal vortex centered on the pendulum. The temperature in the room dropped to near freezing. "These readings are off the scale," she said, her voice tense with excitement. "The energy patterns are consistent with theoretical models of time dilation. It's as if the clock is creating a bridge between different temporal planes." The next day passed in a blur of measurements, calculations, and increasingly strange phenomena. The clock's ticking became irregular, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down. Objects near it would vibrate slightly, and compasses wouldn't work within 10 feet of it. That night the message was clearer. "Tomorrow at midnight the door opens. Step through or stay behind." Dr. Chen's readings showed the temporal distortion growing stronger by the hour. The space behind the pendulum seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a living thing. The marks on the clock face and paper pulsed with blue light, even during the day now. Whatever's happening, Dr. Chen said, it's building towards something. These energy patterns are following an exponential curve. Tomorrow at midnight, they'll reach a critical point. The final day was the strangest of all. Time seemed to move differently in the house. Clocks and watches wouldn't stay synchronized. The temperature fluctuated wildly. The humming from the grandfather clock was constant now, a low vibration that made the windows rattle. As midnight approached, Dr. Chen's equipment showed the temporal distortion reaching unprecedented levels. The blue glow from the marks was bright enough to light the entire room. The space behind the pendulum had become a swirling vortex of darkness and light. At 11:59, a final message appeared. The choice is yours. Through the door lies a different path, a chance to explore what time truly means. Stay, and the door closes forever. The pendulum stopped. The vortex stabilized, becoming a doorway of swirling energy. Through it I could see something. Not another place exactly, but the possibility of places, paths, branching and reconnecting. Time flowing in patterns I could barely comprehend. Dr. Chen's equipment recorded everything, but her attention was fixed on the doorway. This is it, she whispered. A genuine temporal anomaly. The implications for physics were staggering. I stood before the clock, feeling the pull of the vortex. The choice was clear: step through into whatever lay beyond, or stay in the world I knew. The humming had become a song, promising adventures beyond imagination. But as I stood there, I thought about my life, my family, my work. I thought about my father and his father before him, and their connection to this clock. I thought about choices and consequences, paths taken and not taken. The seconds ticked away. The vortex pulsed, waiting for my decision. At exactly midnight, I made my choice. I reached out and closed the clock's case. The vortex collapsed with a sound like a distant thunderclap. The blue glow faded. The marks on the clock face and paper disappeared, leaving no trace they had ever been there. The pendulum resumed its steady swing, ticking away the seconds. Dr. Chen's equipment showed the temporal distortion dissipating. The energy patterns returned to normal. She looked at me, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes, she said, the most important discoveries are the ones that remind us where we belong. The clock continues to keep perfect time now. No more midnight resets, no more strange marks, no more temporal doorways. But sometimes late at night, I sit in my chair and listen to its steady ticking. And I wonder about the paths not taken, the adventures not chosen, and the mysteries that lie behind the familiar face of time. Dr. Chen published a paper about the temporal anomaly, carefully anonymized to protect my privacy. It caused quite a stir in the physics community, though no one has been able to replicate the conditions or explain exactly what happened. She still visits occasionally, taking readings and measurements, but the clock remains stubbornly normal. The piece of paper with the strange marks is gone, vanished as completely as the scratches on the clock face. But I kept detailed notes of everything that happened, locked away in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take them out and read through them, reassuring myself that it wasn't all a dream. The grandfather clock still stands in my living room, keeping perfect time. It looks exactly as it has for generations. A beautiful piece of craftsmanship, nothing more. But now and then, when the house is quiet and the night is deep, I catch a glimpse of something in the reflection on the glass. Perhaps a flicker of blue light, or maybe just a reminder. I still can't sleep at night, not since what happened at the Riverside Apartments 2 months ago. I keep the curtains closed now. I don't look out windows after dark. Some things you can unsee and some things follow you home. It started 3 months ago when I moved into apartment 4B at the Riverside. The building wasn't much, a weathered 6-story walk-up from the 1960s with creaky floors and temperamental heating. But the rent was right, and the location let me walk to my job at the accounting firm downtown. The first few weeks were normal. I'd come home from work, heat up some dinner, maybe watch Netflix. Sometimes I sit out on my small balcony in the evening, drinking beer and watching the city lights come on. That's when I first noticed her. She stood on a balcony 3 floors up and 2 units over, perfectly still, staring down at the street. Just a dark silhouette against the brick wall. I didn't think much of it at first. Lots of people like to get fresh air at night, but after a few evenings, I realized something wasn't right. She never moved. Not once. No shifting weight from foot to foot, no checking a phone, no smoking a cigarette, just standing there rigid as a statue for hours, always in the same spot, always in the same position. I started timing her. She'd appear at 11:47 p.m. exactly and vanish at 3:33 a.m. The location bothered me too. That balcony was on the 7th floor, but the building only had 6 stories. I convinced myself I was miscounting floors in the dark. After 2 weeks of this, I started watching more carefully. I'd set an alarm for 11:45 and wait. Sure enough, every night she'd appear right on schedule. Through my binoculars, I could make out more details. She wore what looked like an old-fashioned dress, ankle length and high-necked. Her hair was long and dark, hanging straight down her back. She never turned around. The whole thing made my skin crawl, but I couldn't stop watching. I started losing sleep, spending those 4 hours just staring at her still form. My work began to suffer. Dark circles appeared under my eyes. I jumped at small noises. I needed answers. Yesterday morning I called Mr. Peterson, the building manager, in the lobby. He was fixing a loose handrail, cursing under his breath as he wrestled with a screwdriver. "Hey, quick question," I said, trying to sound casual. "That woman in 7C, the one who stands on her balcony at night, is she okay? I mean, it seems kind of weird." Peterson stopped working and looked at me strangely. 7C? "Son, this building only has 6 floors." My mouth went dry. "But I've seen her. Every night. She stands out there for hours, just staring down at the street." Peterson put down his screwdriver. "Listen," he said, "maybe you're seeing someone in one of the other buildings. But there's no apartment 7C, and there's definitely no woman standing on any balcony that doesn't exist. But in another thing," he continued, lowering his voice, "the last tenant in 6C, right below where you're talking about, moved out 3 years ago. We had to seal that unit up after a bad flood damaged the whole floor. Nobody's lived there since." My hand started shaking. "You're sure?" "Son, I've managed this building for 20 years. I think I know how many floors it has." He picked up his screwdriver and turned back to the handrail. "Get some sleep. You look like you need it." I barely made it through work that day. My mind kept going back to what Peterson had said. I knew what I'd seen, every single night for weeks. But how could she be standing on a balcony that didn't exist? That night, I set my alarm for 11:45 as usual. My palms were sweating as I walked out onto my balcony. The street below was empty except for a stray cat picking through a garbage can. The windows above me were dark. 11:47 p.m. She appeared. Same position, same dress, same long dark hair, but something was different. She wasn't looking down at the street anymore. She was looking directly at me. My whole body went cold. I gripped the balcony railing to steady myself. Through the binoculars, I could see her more clearly now. The dress was faded and torn. Her hair wasn't just dark, it was matted with something that looked black in the dim light. And her face. There was no face. Where features should have been, there was just smooth, blank skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. But somehow I knew she was seeing me. Had been seeing me all along. I dropped the binoculars. They clattered on the balcony floor. My legs gave out, and I sat down hard, my heart pounding so fast I thought it would burst. She didn't move, didn't react. Just kept staring at me with that smooth, blank face. I crawled back inside and slammed the door, pulling the curtain shut. My hands shook so badly I could barely lock the deadbolts. I grabbed my phone to call Peterson, then remembered it was almost midnight. The night seemed to stretch on forever. I sat in my living room with every light on, jumping at every small sound. The heating kicked on and I nearly screamed. A car horn blared outside and I dove behind the couch. At 3:33 a.m., something made me look toward the balcony. Through a small gap in the curtains, I could see the night sky and silhouetted against it, a face. That smooth, blank face was pressed against my balcony door, staring in at me. I ran. I didn't even grab my keys or wallet. Just ran down 4 flights of stairs in my socks and out into the street. I spent the rest of the night in a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee with shaking hands and flinching every time someone walked past the window. I went back at dawn to pack some clothes. The balcony door was still locked. There were no footprints in the dust, no sign anyone had been there. But when I looked up at where apartment 7C should be, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The brick wall was distorted like a funhouse mirror. It bulged outward in places and sank inward in others. And in the center of the distortion was the perfect outline of a balcony, one that shouldn't exist. I moved out that day, found a hotel downtown and started apartment hunting. I'm in a new place now on the ground floor, no balconies. Sometimes late at night, I'll catch movement in my peripheral vision. A flash of dark hair, a faded dress, and when I turn to look, there's nothing there. But I know she followed me. I can feel her watching, waiting. Every night at 11:47, I get the urge to look outside to see if she's there. But I don't. I can't, because I know what I'll see. That smooth, blank face staring back at me through the window. The police didn't believe me when I filed a report. Peterson swears up and down that the building never had a 7th floor. I've talked to other tenants, and none of them ever saw her. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. But then I remember that face, that horrible blank face, pressed against my balcony door. And I know it was real. All of it was real. I still don't know what she wants, why she chose me to watch, why she followed me. But I know she's out there, standing perfectly still in the darkness, waiting for me to look outside again. So I keep my curtains closed. I stay away from windows after dark, and every night at 11:47, I turn up my TV to drown out any sounds from outside. Because I know if I look, if I dare to peek through those curtains, she'll be there, and this time she might be closer than the balcony. The doctors say I'm suffering from paranoid delusions brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. They have prescribed anti-anxiety medication and recommended therapy. Maybe they're right. Maybe my mind created the whole thing to cope with the pressure of my new job and living alone. But I don't think so. Because sometimes in the middle of the night, I hear something. A soft scraping sound like fingernails on glass. Even with my back turned to the windows and the curtains closed, I can feel it, that eyeless gaze boring into me, waiting for me to turn around. I've started looking for jobs in other cities. Maybe if I move far enough away, she won't be able to follow. But deep down, I know that's not true. Whatever she is, distance doesn't matter to her. She'll find me. So I sit here in my ground floor apartment, curtains drawn, lights blazing, writing this down. Maybe someone will read it and understand. Maybe someone else has seen her too. Or maybe this really is all in my head. And I'll look back on this someday and laugh at how I let my imagination run wild. But I don't think so, because it's 11:46 p.m. now. In 1 minute, she'll appear somewhere outside, and even though I can't see her, even though I won't look, I know she'll be staring at me with that smooth, blank face. Waiting. Always waiting. I first heard it 3 nights after moving into Unit 407 of the Oakwood Apartments, a soft rhythmic sound coming from somewhere behind my headboard. At first I thought it was just the building settling or the ventilation system acting up. These pre-war buildings always had their quirks, and at $100 a month in this part of the city, I couldn't expect perfection. The sound was barely noticeable during that first week, a gentle in and outs that reminded me of someone sleeping deeply. I'd lie in bed scrolling through my phone until midnight, and occasionally my attention would drift to that quiet whisper of air. I'd press my ear against the wall, trying to determine if it was coming from the adjacent apartment. The wall felt cool against my skin, and the sound would fade in and out like waves lapping at a distant shore. Probably just the neighbor, I told myself, pulling away from the wall and turning up the volume on my phone to drown it out. These old buildings have thin walls, but by the second week, something changed. The breathing grew louder, more distinct. I noticed it wasn't coming from a fixed point anymore. It seemed to move along the wall inch by inch, night after night. I started tracking its progress with post-it notes, pressing them against the wall where I'd last heard the sound before falling asleep. Each morning I'd wake up to find the breathing had shifted another few inches closer to my pillow. The rental office wasn't helpful. Sandra, the property manager, just smiled and shook her head when I mentioned it. Mr. Chen in 408 is a very quiet tenant, she said, tapping her pen against a stack of lease renewals. Never had a complaint about him in 3 years. Are you sure you're not just adjusting to the building's normal sounds? I wasn't convinced. That night, I knocked on Mr. Chen's door. A small man in his 60s answered, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan. His apartment mirrored mine, but it felt warmer somehow, with family photos on the walls and the smell of jasmine tea in the air. Breathing sounds, he asked, frowning. No, I sleep with earplugs. My wife snores. He chuckled, gesturing to an elderly woman dozing in a recliner by the window. But I'm usually in bed by 9. Could it be the person below you? I checked with the tenant in 307 the next day. The woman who answered was in her 20s like me, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she worked night shifts. She shook her head before I even finished explaining. "I'm never even home at night," she said. "I work at the hospital." The breathing continued its slow migration across my wall. By the third week, it had moved from behind my headboard to just beside my pillow. I started sleeping on the couch, but even from the living room, I could hear it. Steady inhale, exhale that seemed to follow me through the apartment. I began documenting everything. I set up my phone to record the sounds at night, but the recordings came out fuzzy and unclear. I took photos of the wall looking for cracks or holes, but found nothing unusual. I even borrowed an infrared thermometer from work and checked for cold spots. But the temperature remained consistent across the entire surface. One night, unable to sleep, I pressed my palm flat against the wall where the breathing was loudest. The surface vibrated slightly with each exhale, and I swore I could feel warmth radiating through the plaster. I yanked my hand back, my heart pounding. The breathing seemed to pause for a moment, then resumed slightly faster than before. I started researching the building's history. The oak wood was built in 1928, renovated in the 1970s, and again in the early 2000s. No reported deaths in my unit, no mysterious disappearances. Nothing that would explain what I was experiencing. The local historical society had archives of old newspapers, but hours of scrolling through microfiche revealed nothing more sinister than a series of code violations in the 1980s. The lack of information made it worse somehow. I could deal with the haunting if I knew the story behind it, but this formless, sourceless breathing was driving me crazy. I started staying out late, hitting bars after work just to avoid going home. My performance at the office suffered. Dark circles appeared under my eyes, matching those of my downstairs neighbor. "You look like shit," my coworker Dave told me one morning over coffee. "Everything okay with the new place?" I wanted to tell him everything, but I knew how it would sound. Instead, I just shrugged, still adjusting, I guess. Old buildings take some getting used to, but I wasn't getting used to it. The breathing had moved again, now seemingly emanating from directly above my pillow when I tried to sleep. I could hear it clearly even with earplugs in, even with a white noise machine blasting. It had a wet quality to it now, like someone breathing through a congested nose. I started sleeping in 2-hour shifts, never letting myself fall into deep sleep. I lined the wall with foam soundproofing panels, but they seemed to make the breathing louder somehow, as if it was being channeled and amplified. I tried sleeping with my head at the foot of the bed, but the sound followed, always positioning itself near my ear. The breaking point came a month after it all started. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find myself pressed against the wall, my ear flush against the surface, as if I'd been drawn to it in my sleep. The breathing was right there, so close it felt like someone's lips were almost touching my ear. I could feel the warm air moving against my skin. I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing so hard I thought it might burst. My t-shirt was soaked with sweat, and my legs shook as I backed away from the wall. The breathing followed my movement, tracking me across the room. For the first time, I heard something new, a low, gravelly sound underneath the breathing, almost like a chuckle. That was it. I grabbed my laptop, phone, and a change of clothes, shoved them into my backpack, and walked out. I spent the night at a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee and researching short-term rentals on my phone. When the rental office opened at 9 a.m., I was waiting outside. "I need to break my lease," I told Sandra, sliding my keys across her desk. "You'll pay whatever penalty is necessary." She started to protest, reminding me of the terms of my lease, but something in my face must have stopped her. Maybe it was the wild look in my eyes, or the visible trembling in my hands. She sighed and pulled out a form. "Fill this out," she said. "Well, need you to pay through the end of next month, but then you're free to go." I signed everything without reading it, wrote a check for the remaining balance, and walked out. My hands had finally stopped shaking. I'd come back for my furniture later during daylight hours, with friends to help me move quickly. As I waited for my Uber outside, I glanced up at my window on the 4th floor. Through the glass, I could see the foam panels I'd installed, still perfectly aligned along the wall. And for a moment just before my ride arrived, I swore I saw one of them move slightly, pulsing in and out like something was breathing behind it. I moved in with my sister temporarily while looking for a new place. She asked questions about why I left so suddenly, but I deflected them. How could I explain what had happened without sounding insane? Instead, I told her the commute was too long, the building was too old, and the rent was too high. 2 months later, I found a newer apartment in a different part of the city. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbors watching TV, arguing, living their lives. Sometimes at night I lie awake listening to these normal human sounds, grateful for their mundane clarity. I never went back to Unit 407. I hired movers to get my furniture, telling them to leave anything that wouldn't fit in the truck. Sometimes I think about the next tenant, wondering if they've heard it yet, that soft, persistent breathing that moves through the wall like a living thing. I wonder if they're lying awake right now, tracking its slow progress across the wall, feeling it draw closer night by night. But I try not to think about it too much. I focus on the present, on my new apartment with its solid walls and mechanical sounds. I've started sleeping better, though I still keep my bed pulled away from the wall, just in case. The only thing I kept from my old apartment was the infrared thermometer. It sits in my desk drawer unused. Sometimes late at night, I'm tempted to take it out to check the temperature of my new bedroom walls. But I never do. Some things are better left unmeasured. Some questions better left unanswered. I did drive past the Oakwood once, about 6 months after I moved out. It was a cold Sunday morning, and the building looked the same as ever. Red brick, white trim, wrought iron fire escapes zigzagging up the facade. I counted the windows to the 4th floor, found what I thought was 407. The lights were on, curtains drawn. I watched for a while thinking about knocking on the door, warning whoever lived there now. But what would I say? How could I explain what I'd experienced without sounding crazy? In the end, I drove away, leaving the building and its secrets behind. Sometimes, in those moments between waking and sleeping, when the world goes quiet and still, I catch myself listening, not for anything specific, just listening, waiting. And in those moments, I have to remind myself that the soft sound I hear is just my own breathing, nothing more. That the walls around me are just walls, solid silence. That whatever lived in the walls of Unit 407 is far behind me now. At least, that's what I tell myself. It's what I have to believe to sleep at night, to function during the day, to move forward with my life. But there are times, rare times, when I'm alone in my new apartment, and I press my ear against the wall just to make sure, just to confirm that the only breathing I hear is my own. And so far, it always has been. So far. I should have known something was wrong when the realtor couldn't look me in the eye while discussing the basement. She kept her gaze fixed on her clipboard, rattling off facts about the original hardwood floors and updated electrical system. But now, 3 months after moving in, I'm sitting in my kitchen at 3 a.m., listening to footsteps echo from below, wondering if I made the biggest mistake of my life. The house seemed perfect at first. Built in 1932, it needed work, but had potential. The price was surprisingly low for the neighborhood, and I convinced myself it was because of the outdated kitchen and bathrooms. I spent 2 months renovating everything. New appliances, fresh paint, modern fixtures. I even replaced all the old locks and doors, except for that heavy wooden door leading to the basement. It was solid oak, still sturdy after all these years. The previous owners had installed 3 dead bolts on it, which I thought was excessive. Now I know why. The first incident happened about a week after I finished the renovations. I came home from work to find the basement door standing wide open, warm light spilling onto the hallway floor. I distinctly remembered locking all 3 deadbolts that morning. It had become part of my routine. I checked the locks, but they showed no signs of damage. Nothing was missing from the house. The only thing out of place was that door, swung open as if inviting me down those stairs. I convinced myself I must have forgotten to lock it properly. The next morning, I made a point of checking each deadbolt 3 times before leaving. When I returned that evening, the door was open again. The basement lights, which I never used because the switches at the bottom of the stairs were on. My hands shook as I walked down into the basement. It was empty, like always, just concrete walls, exposed pipes, and a few boxes of holiday decorations I hadn't unpacked yet. The light switch was firmly in the off position, despite fluorescent bulbs burning bright overhead. I flipped it up and down several times, but nothing changed. Finally, I unscrewed the bulbs themselves. The basement plunged into darkness. The next day, I installed a padlock, industrial grade, the kind they use on storage units. I locked the door, tugged on it to make sure it was secure, and left for work. You can probably guess what I found when I came home. The door was open, the padlock lying intact on the floor, and new fluorescent bulbs glowing in the fixtures. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts or demons or any supernatural nonsense. But I do believe my eyes and my ears and the growing knot of dread in my stomach. Every single day, no matter what locks I install or how I secure it, that door opens itself. Sometimes I hear noises, footsteps on the stairs, the scrape of furniture being moved, muffled thuds. But the basement is always empty when I check. Last week I installed security cameras, one facing the basement door, one at the bottom of the stairs, and one covering the main room of the basement. The footage showed nothing. The door would be closed in one frame, open in the next, with no indication of movement in between. The basement lights would suddenly turn on, but the switch never moved. The cameras picked up the sounds I'd been hearing, but showed an empty room. I tried boarding up the door. I nailed 2x4s across it in an X pattern, securing them into the frame with 3-inch screws. When I came home, the boards had been removed. Not broken or damaged. Removed. The screws were lined up neatly on the floor, the boards stacked against the wall. The previous owners left no forwarding address. The realtor claims she doesn't have their contact information. County records show the house changed hands 8 times in the past 20 years, with no owner staying longer than 18 months. I should have seen that as a red flag. Last night, things escalated. I was sitting in my living room trying to distract myself with TV when I heard something new from the basement. Humming. A low, tuneless sound, like someone absently humming while doing chores. It went on for hours. I didn't sleep. This morning, I called a locksmith and had him install the most sophisticated electronic lock made. Fingerprint recognition, backup keypad, the works, which cost me nearly I just got home from work 10 minutes ago. The door is open, but the lock is still functioning perfectly. And now as I sit here in my kitchen, I can hear someone walking up and down those basement stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps that reach the top, pause, then descend again over and over. I've tried to find a rational explanation. Gas leak. No, had to check twice. Carbon monoxide. Bought 3 detectors, all reading normal. Neighborhood kids playing pranks. Impossible. I've set up enough cameras and sensors to catch anyone breaking in. Besides, the door opens even when I'm home, sitting right next to it. The humming has started again. It's louder tonight, more insistent. I've been recording everything on my phone, but when I play it back, there's only static. The cameras show an empty basement, yet I can hear furniture being dragged across the floor below my feet. I called a priest last week, not because I believe in possession or hauntings, but because I'm running out of options. He blessed the house, sprinkled holy water in every corner of the basement, and said a prayer in Latin. The door stayed closed for exactly 24 hours after he left. Then I heard laughter from the basement. Actual laughter, echoing up the stairs. When I checked, the holy water had been wiped clean from every surface. The police want help. I sound crazy when I try to explain it, and without any evidence of break-ins or vandalism, they can't do anything. My friends have stopped coming over. They get uncomfortable when the door swings open by itself, when the lights flicker, when the humming starts. I don't blame them. I thought about selling, but I can't bring myself to do that to someone else. Besides, who would buy a house when the owner tells them the basement door won't stay shut? I'd have to lie, and that feels wrong. Whatever is happening here, I don't want it on my conscience. The footsteps have stopped. Now they're scratching, like fingernails on concrete. It's moving along the walls, getting closer to the stairs. I've never heard this sound before. My hands are sweating as I type this on my laptop, trying to document everything. The scratching is at the top of the stairs now. The door's still open, warm light spilling out. I should run. I should get in my car and drive away and never come back. But I've invested everything I have in this house. My savings, my time, my future. I can't just walk away. The scratching has stopped. The humming is back, but different this time. It sounds like words, just on the edge of comprehension. If I concentrate, I can almost make them out. Almost. I've started sleeping in my car some nights, but even then I can see the basement lights turning on and off through the windows. The neighbors have noticed. They give me strange looks when I get home from work, standing in my driveway for long minutes before working up the courage to go inside. Yesterday I tried something new. I set up a chair facing the open basement door and sat there all day, just watching. The humming stopped. The footsteps stopped. Everything was quiet, but as soon as I went to the bathroom, I heard a crash from the basement. When I ran back, one of my packed boxes had been emptied, its contents scattered across the floor. I'm writing this all down because I need someone to understand what's happening here. The scratching has started again. It's moving down the hallway now towards the kitchen where I'm sitting. I can hear something dragging behind it, something heavy. The security cameras are still running, still showing an empty basement, an empty hallway. But I can hear it getting closer. The sound is wet now, like something sliding across the floor. The humming is louder, almost clear enough to understand. I've called a contractor to come tomorrow and seal the basement door permanently, brick it up, cover it with drywall, make it look like it never existed. It's my last option. If this doesn't work, the dragging sound is right outside the kitchen now. The humming has stopped. All I can hear is my own breathing and that wet sliding sound. The basement lights are flickering, casting strange shadows in the hallway. I'm gonna post this somewhere, anywhere, so there's a record. So the next owner, if there is one, knows what they're getting into. The air has gone cold. I can see my breath. The sliding sound is right behind me now. I should have asked more questions when the realtor wouldn't look me in the eye. I should have wondered why the previous owners installed 3 dead bolts. I should have noticed how everyone in the neighborhood avoids walking on my side of the street. The basement lights just went out. I won't turn around. I won't turn around. I won't turn around. But I can feel breath on the back of my neck. The first thud came at 3:17 a.m. I know because I checked my phone, cursing whoever was making noise at that hour. Living on the top floor of Highland Towers was supposed to mean peace and quiet. That's why I paid a premium for apartment 1201. But the heavy footsteps above me continued, each one sending vibrations through my ceiling. I lay in bed, staring up at the white popcorn texture above me, tracking the footsteps as they moved from what would be the living room into what should be the bedroom area of 1301. The steps were deliberate, slow, like someone wearing work boots, with each foot planted with purpose. After 15 minutes of this, I grabbed my robe and headed for the elevator. The night manager would hear about this. I've lived here for 3 years, and while the building wasn't perfect, this kind of disturbance was unacceptable. The lobby was dimly lit at this hour. Frank, the elderly night manager, sat at his desk, doing a crossword puzzle. He looked up when I approached, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Mr. Davidson," he said, setting down his pen, "you're up late. Someone moved into the 130-on-1 without telling anyone. They're stomping around up there like they're wearing concrete shoes." Frank's bushy eyebrows drew together. "That's not possible, sir. While someone's up there, I can hear them clear as day." "Mr. Davidson," Frank pulled off his glasses and polished them with his shirt. 1301 has been empty since Mrs. Rodriguez moved out in June. We're renovating it. The door is padlocked. My mouth went dry. Then who's walking around up there? Must be the building settling. These old towers make all kinds of noises at night. I shook my head. No, these are footsteps. Heavy ones, like someone's pacing. Frank sighed and pulled out a ring of keys. "Let's go take a look. Will that put your mind at ease?" The elevator ride to the 13th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the hallway was dark, except for the dim emergency lights. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floor as we approached 1301. True to Frank's word, a heavy padlock secured the door. He unlocked it and switched on his flashlight before we entered. The apartment was completely empty. Dust sheets covered the floors and the walls were stripped to bare drywall in some places. Paint cans and tools were scattered about. The air smelled of plaster and emptiness. We checked every room. No signs of entry. No footprints in the dust. The windows were sealed shut. Satisfied, Frank asked. I nodded, feeling foolish. But as soon as I got back to my apartment, the footsteps started again. That was 3 weeks ago. The footsteps haven't stopped. They follow a pattern now. They start around 3 a.m., always with that first heavy thud. Then pacing, back and forth for about an hour. Sometimes they stop at the spot directly above my bed and just stand there. I can feel the weight pressing down through the ceiling. I've called the police twice. They've found nothing. The building management has sent maintenance workers to check the roof, the ventilation system, and the electrical. Nothing explains the sounds. I've recorded them on my phone, but the recordings come out distorted, just static and low rumbles. Last night, I finally cracked. At 3:15 a.m., I sat up in bed waiting. The first thud came right on schedule. I got dressed and grabbed my toolbox from the closet. The building was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioning as I made my way up the emergency stairs to the 13th floor. The padlock was still in place. I looked both ways down the empty hallway, then pulled out my drill. The lock would need to be replaced, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to see for myself. The door creaked open. I stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The footsteps continued overhead, but that was impossible. I was on the top floor and this was where the sounds were coming from. I moved through the empty rooms, checking every corner, every closet. The footsteps seemed to stay just ahead of me, always in the next room. My flashlight flickered. The air grew colder. In the master bedroom, I found something new, a single work boot print in the dust. It wasn't there during the inspection with Frank. As I stared at it, another footstep sounded right behind me. I spun around. The beam of my flashlight caught something moving just for a second. A shadow, perhaps. But the air felt heavy, like someone was standing there watching. I backed out of the apartment, slammed the door, and ran down the stairs to my unit. I didn't stop until I was inside with every light on and my back pressed against the wall. The footsteps followed, resuming their pace above my head. This morning, I called a real estate agent. I don't care about breaking my lease or losing my security deposit, but she told me something that made my blood run cold. There was a construction accident when they built this tower in the 1980s. A worker disappeared during the final phases of construction. They searched the building for days but never found him. I'm typing this from a hotel room across town, where my neighbors think I'm crazy. The building management has threatened to evict me if I break into apartment 1301 again. But I know what I heard. I saw what I saw. The thing is, I have to go back. I left some important documents in my apartment safe and I need them for work. I'm going during daylight hours this time. It should be safe then. The footsteps only come at night. As I sit here in my hotel room, I can't shake the feeling that when I return to get my papers, something will be waiting for me. Not in 1301, but in my own apartment. Because last night, just before I fled, I heard something new. The footsteps started coming down the walls. I've hired a private investigator to look into the building's history. He's found some interesting details about James Martinez, age 42. He was working overtime alone on the upper floors when he disappeared. His tools were found scattered on what would become the 13th floor, but no trace of him was ever discovered. The PI also uncovered something that building management never told me. 3 other residents of 120 have broken their leases and moved out in the past decade. All complained about noises from above. I'm meeting with a structural engineer tomorrow. Maybe there's a rational explanation, some quirk of the building's design that creates these sounds. But that doesn't explain the footprint I saw, or the shadow that moved in the darkness. For now, I'm staying at the hotel. My clothes still smell like dust from 1301, and every time I close my eyes, I see that single boot print in the beam of my flashlight. Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, I swear I can still hear those footsteps, even though I'm miles away from Highland Towers. The worst part isn't the footsteps themselves. It's not the cold spots or shadows, or even the feeling of being watched. It's the certainty that grows stronger every day. Whatever walks into 1301 knows that I know it's there, and it's waiting for me to come back. I've started documenting everything, the dates and times of the footsteps, the patterns they follow, the temperature drops I've measured, and the distortions in my recordings. Maybe if I can understand the pattern, I can figure out what it wants. The PI called again. He found more details about James Martinez. He had been working double shifts for weeks, trying to earn extra money for his daughter's college fund. The night he disappeared, he was installing fixtures in what would become apartment 1301. His toolbox was found next to an open utility shaft, but the shaft had been thoroughly searched. His body was never recovered. I have to go back to my apartment tomorrow. My boss has been patient, but I need those documents. I've arranged for the PI to come with me. We'll go at noon when the building is full of people and sunlight streams through the windows. I've memorized the structural layout of both floors. I've mapped every exit. I've even borrowed a thermal camera from a friend who does home inspections. But as I pack my bag for tomorrow's visit, my hands won't stop shaking. Because I know something now that I didn't know before. Something that makes all of this so much worse. I checked the building plans at City Hall. According to the original blueprints, there was supposed to be a 13th floor for maintenance and utilities. But during construction, they sealed it off. The 13th floor that exists now, the one with apartment 1301, wasn't in the original plans. It shouldn't exist at all. The PI and I are going in tomorrow at exactly 12:07 p.m. That's when the sun is highest and the maintenance staff has their lunch break. We'll have 30 minutes to get what I need for my apartment and take one final look at 1301. I've written down everything I know, everything I've seen and heard. If something happens tomorrow, at least there will be a record. At least someone will know the truth about what walks above apartment 101. But tonight in my hotel room, I keep thinking about that footprint in the dust. It was a size 12 work boot, the same size James Martinez wore according to his missing persons report. And it was facing the wall, not the door or the windows, as if whatever made it had walked straight through the solid concrete. Tomorrow will be my last visit to Highland Towers. After that, the building can keep its secrets. Let someone else listen to the footsteps above. Let someone else wonder why the 13th floor exists when it shouldn't. Because the footsteps aren't just in the walls anymore. Last night was the first time I heard them in my dreams, and they were getting closer. I should have known better than to buy anything from that cramped antique shop on Mason Street. The dust-coated windows and weathered wooden sign didn't exactly scream reliable establishment. But that mirror caught my eye the moment I passed by. It was propped against the storefront window, partially hidden behind a stack of old leather suitcases. I stopped walking and pressed my face against the glass. The mirror's frame was dark, mahogany, carved with intricate geometric patterns that seemed to draw the eye inward. The glass itself had a slight waviness, like you see in old mirrors, the kind that distorts reflections just enough to make them interesting. I needed something for that blank wall in my living room, and this looked perfect. The bell above the door jangled as I walked in. The smell hit me first, musty wood, old paper, and something else I couldn't identify. The shop was narrow, with barely enough room to walk between the crowded shelves. The owner appeared from behind a tall cabinet, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with thick glasses and thinning gray hair. The mirror in the window, I said, pointing.
How much?
He glanced at it, then back at me. $800. I laughed. For that old thing, come on. $750, he said flatly. It's 19th century, hand-carved frame. We haggled for a few minutes before settling on $600. More than I wanted to spend, but something about that mirror wouldn't let me walk away. The owner helped me carry it out to my car, handling it with surprising care for someone his age. Keep it covered when you're not using it, he said as we loaded it into my trunk. Sunlight's not good for the frame. I nodded, already thinking about where exactly I'd hang it. The wall opposite my couch needed something, and the mirror would reflect light from the windows, making the room feel bigger. It took me an hour to mount it properly that evening. The thing was heavier than it looked, and I had to redo the wall anchors twice to make sure they could hold the weight. By the time I finished, my shoulders ached, and I had a collection of small cuts on my hands from the sharp edges of the frame. But it looked perfect, exactly what the room needed. I settled onto the couch with a beer, admiring how the mirror caught the warm light from my floor lamp. The geometric patterns in the frame cast interesting shadows, and the slight distortion in the glass made the reflection of my living room look almost like a painting. That's when I saw the first movement. It's just a flicker in the corner of the mirror, like someone walking past quickly. I turned around, but of course there was nothing there. Just my empty living room, exactly as it should be. I took another sip of beer and chalked it up to tired eyes and shadows. The next few days were normal. I went to work, came home, watched TV, the usual routine stuff. The mirror became just another piece of furniture. Sometimes I catch my reflection as I walked past and straightened my posture or fixed my hair, but that was it. Then came Tuesday night. I was on the couch again, half watching a basketball game while scrolling through my phone. Movement in the mirror caught my eye again. This time it was clearer, a dark shape, person-sized, passing from one side of the reflection to the other. I whipped my head around so fast my neck cracked. Nothing. The room was empty. My heart was pounding. I got up and checked every room in the apartment, even though I knew I was alone. All the doors and windows were locked. Nothing was out of place. When I came back to the living room, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time studying my reflection in the room behind me. Everything looked normal, if slightly warped by the old glass. I almost convinced myself I was seeing things. Almost. But then it happened again the next night, and the next. Always when I was sitting on the couch. Always in my peripheral vision. Dark shapes moving across the background of the mirror's reflection. Sometimes just one, sometimes two or three. Never when I looked directly at them, only when I was focused on something else. I started taking notes, trying to find patterns. The movements usually happened between 8 p.m. and midnight. They were more frequent when the room was dimly lit. They never made any sound, and they seemed to be getting bolder. A week after hanging the mirror, I was reading a book when I saw one of the shapes stop in the middle of the mirror. Just stopped and stood there. I forced myself to keep staring at my book. Hard hammering in my chest. From the corner of my eye, I could see it. A dark person-shaped silhouette standing perfectly still in the reflection. It stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When I finally couldn't take it anymore and looked up, he was gone. I started sleeping badly. Every noise in my apartment made me jump. I knew how crazy it sounded. A haunted mirror, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. The shapes were getting clearer, more defined. They moved with purpose now, not just passing by, but seeming to observe. Sometimes when I caught a glimpse of one, it appeared to be facing my reflection, watching me. I tried covering the mirror with a sheet one night. The shapes stopped, but I could hear the sheet rustling slightly, even though there was no draft in the room. When I finally worked up the courage to pull the sheet down 3 days later, the glass seemed darker somehow, like it had absorbed some of the darkness from behind the fabric. I called the antique shop, but the number was disconnected. When I drove by, the windows were papered over and a for lease sign hung in the door. The owner was gone, along with any information about where the mirror came from. The internet wasn't much help. I found plenty of stories about haunted mirrors, but they all seemed like obvious fiction. Nothing matched what I was experiencing. I couldn't find any information about mirrors with similar frames or patterns either. Last night was the worst so far. I was dozing on the couch when something made me open my eyes. In the mirror, a figure stood directly behind my reflection. It was tall, darker than the other shapes, and more solid looking. My reflection was clear, but the figure behind it was like a hole in the world, a person-shaped absence of light. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure raised what might have been an arm, reaching toward my reflection's shoulder. I felt a cold pressure there, like someone pressing an ice cube against my skin through my shirt. My throat closed up. The room started spinning and then my phone rang, shattering the moment. The figure vanished. I scrambled off the couch, gasping for air. The call was from my sister, asking about weekend plans. I've never been so grateful for a phone call in my life. I slept in my car that night. I couldn't face going back into that room. I couldn't stand the thought of what might be waiting in the mirror. This morning, I called in sick to work and started looking for someone to help me remove it. But the mirror is too heavy for me to handle alone. And how do I explain this to anyone else? So now I'm sitting in a coffee shop, writing this all down, trying to figure out what to do. The smart thing would be to just move out, leave the mirror behind. But I can't do that to the next tenant. And something tells me these things in the mirror, whatever they are interested in me specifically now. They might follow. The sun's going down. Soon I'll have to decide whether to go home or find a hotel. My phone's buzzing. Another call from my sister. She's probably worried since I didn't call her back. I should answer it. I should tell her everything. But what if she thinks I'm crazy? What if everyone thinks I'm crazy? The shapes in the mirror are real. The cold touch on my shoulder was real. I know what I saw, what I felt. But knowing something's real doesn't make it any less terrifying. My coffee's cold. The barista is giving me concerned looks. I've been here for hours. Through the cafe window, I can see my car in the parking lot. I could drive home right now, walk into my apartment, and take that mirror down. Just grab it and drag it out even if it breaks. Get rid of it somehow. But what if they're waiting for that? What if taking it down is exactly what they want? What if breaking the mirror makes things worse? My phone buzzes again. This time it's a text from my sister. Where are you? I'm at your apartment. My hands start shaking. She's there right now in my living room, probably standing right in front of that mirror. I grab my keys and run for the car. The drive home takes forever, even though I'm breaking speed limits the whole way. My hands are sweating on the steering wheel. I burst through my apartment door, calling out my sister's name. She's standing in the living room, looking at her phone. She turns toward me, startled by my entrance. There you are. I've been trying to reach you all day. Are you okay? I glance at the mirror. My sister's reflection is clear and normal. No shapes behind her, no dark figures, nothing unusual at all. Yeah, I say, trying to catch my breath. Yeah, I'm fine. Just wasn't feeling well. She frowns, studying my face. You look terrible. Have you been sleeping? I force a laugh. Not really. Work's been crazy. I position myself between her and the mirror, trying to act casual about it. Listen, Since you're here, would you help me take this mirror down? I'm thinking of redecorating. She raises an eyebrow. The mirror you just put up? I thought you loved it. Changed my mind. It doesn't fit the room anymore. She shrugs. Sure, I guess. Where do you want to put it? My car for now. I'm gonna sell it. We managed to get the mirror off the wall without too much trouble. It's still heavy, but between the two of us, we can handle it. I insist on covering it with a blanket before we carry it down to my car. My sister gives me weird looks, but doesn't argue. Are you sure you're okay? She asks as we close the trunk. You seem really off. I nod, trying to appear normal, just tired. Thanks for helping with the mirror. She doesn't look convinced, but doesn't push it. After she leaves, I sit in my car for a long time, staring at the trunk in the rearview mirror. The covered mirror is just a vague shape under the blanket, but as the sun sets and shadows deepen in the parking lot, I swear I can see movement under that blanket. Subtle shifting, like something testing its boundaries. I start the car. I don't know where I'm going to dump this thing, but it needs to be far away. Maybe I'll drive until I find a deep lake or a construction site with a convenient dumpster. Somewhere it can't be found again. The engine idles. In the rearview mirror, the trunk looks darker than it should, even in the fading lights. I put the car in reverse. As I turn to look over my shoulder, I catch a glimpse of movement in the rearview mirror. A dark shape rising up from the trunk, reaching toward the back seat. I slam the car into park and jump out, my heart racing. The trunk looks normal. The blanket hasn't moved. Everything's fine, but I know better now. They're in there waiting, and they're getting stronger. I've been sitting in the parking lot for hours now, writing this on my phone. The sun's completely gone. My car is the only one left in the lot. Every few minutes, I check the trunk, but I don't dare open it. The blanket is still in place, but sometimes I think I see it ripple, like something's moving underneath. My sister just texted again, asking if I want to get dinner. I should go. I should act normal, but I can't leave my car overnight without someone breaking in and taking the mirror, unleashing whatever's inside on some unsuspecting person. So I'm gonna start driving. I don't know where yet, but somewhere far, somewhere isolated. I'll deal with this tonight, one way or another. I have to. The shapes in the mirror are real. I know that now without any doubt. What I don't know is what they want, or why they chose me. But I'm going to make sure they never get the chance to show me. I'm starting the car again. The trunk looks normal in the rearview mirror, but I know better than to trust reflections anymore. I'll drive until I find somewhere suitable, somewhere I can dispose of this thing properly. Then maybe I can finally get some sleep without wondering what's watching me from the other side of the glass. The parking lot lights are flickering. Time to go. I just hope whatever's in that mirror stays quiet until I reach my destination, and I hope I never see another antique shop again. The metal creaked under my boots. That's when Mike and I first heard it, a whisper floating up from the darkness below. We both froze on the rusted ladder, our flashlight beams cutting through 30 years of dust. The sound came again, clearer this time, words I couldn't make out, but definitely a voice. Definitely coming from inside this abandoned grain silo we'd been exploring on the edge of town. You hear that? Mike whispered, his voice tight. I nodded, though he couldn't see me above him on the ladder. My hands gripped the cold rungs harder. We'd explored dozens of abandoned places over the years. Old factories, empty houses, defunct mines. But something felt different about this one. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the darkness was pushing back against our lights. The whispers rose again. Multiple voices now, growing louder and then fading. They seemed to be coming from the upper levels, maybe near the top where the loading equipment would be. We should check it out, Mike said, his voice having that familiar, excited edge to it, the same tone he'd used when we were kids breaking into the old paper mill or teenagers sneaking into abandoned subway tunnels. My throat felt dry. Could be squatters, I said, or kids messing around, but the voices didn't sound like either of those things. They had an odd quality I couldn't place, like they were coming through water or static. Only one way to find out. Mike started climbing again, his backpack clanking against the ladder rungs. I followed, trying to control my breathing. The ladder seemed to stretch endlessly upward into the gloom. Our flashlight beams caught thick cobwebs and patches of rust. The air smelled metallic and stale. About halfway up, maybe 40 feet off the ground, Mike's light caught something on the wall. Hold up, he said. Look at this. I aimed my beam where he was pointing. 3 deep gouges ran vertically through the metal wall, cutting through decades of grime. They looked fresh. The exposed metal still had a bright sheen. "Those are claw marks," Mike said quietly. I ran my fingers over the gouges. Each one was about an inch deep and 3 inches wide. The edges felt razor sharp. What could make marks like this in solid steel? Mike shook his head. "Nothing I want to meet." But he kept climbing anyway. The whispers grew louder as we ascended. They seemed to be moving around above us now, accompanied by scraping sounds and dull thuds. My hands were sweating on the rungs despite the cold. Every few feet we found more claw marks, some single gouges, others in sets of 3 or 4. All of them looked fresh. At about 60 feet up, we reached a maintenance platform, just a narrow metal grating circling the inside of the silo. Our lights revealed more damage here. The grating was bent and torn in places with deep scratches everywhere. Whatever had done this was big and strong. "Look," Mike pointed his light at the wall. More claw marks led up to a hatch in the side of the silo. It hung open, its heavy steel door twisted on its hinges. A cold breeze whistled through the opening. The whispers were clear now. They seemed to be coming from both the hatch and somewhere above us. I still couldn't make out words, but the sounds had a desperate, urgent quality that made my skin crawl. "We need to see what's up there," Mike said. He was already moving toward the hatch. I grabbed his arm. "Are you crazy?" Something big enough to tear through steel made those marks. "We need to get out of here." He pulled away. "Come on. We've come this far. Don't you want to know what it is?" That was Mike. Always pushing further, always needing to know what was around the next corner. Usually I admired that about him. Right now it terrified me. A loud metallic groan came from above, followed by a series of heavy thuds that shook the entire platform. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, and then cut off abruptly. Mike was already climbing through the hatch. "Sounds like it's in the upper chamber. We can get a look at it from here." My heart pounding against my ribs. I followed him. The hatch led to a narrow maintenance tunnel that curved along the outer wall of the silo. Our lights revealed more destruction. Walls dented outward like something had tried to punch through them. Floor plates torn up, and more claw marks everywhere. The tunnel ended at another hatch, this one leading into what must have been the upper grain storage chamber. The door was gone completely, torn from its frame. Cold air poured through the opening. Mike crouched at the edge, shining his light inside. I knelt beside him, my whole body trembling. The chamber was huge, at least 50 feet across and 30 feet high. Our lights caught glimpses of old conveyor equipment and grain chutes hanging from the ceiling. The far wall was dominated by a massive loading door designed to swing outward to accept grain deliveries from trucks. It was open now, letting in pale moonlight. Something moved in the shadows near the ceiling, something big. I heard clicking sounds, like massive claws on metal. The whispers started again, seeming to come from all around us. There, Mike hissed, aiming his light upward. The beam caught something that made my blood freeze. A shape clinging to the wall, sleek black fur, powerful limbs, and a long whip-like tail. It was about the size of a bear, but moved like a cat. As we watched, it scuttled sideways along the wall with impossible grace, disappearing into the shadows. More movement caught my eye. 2 more shapes, smaller but similar, crawling along the ceiling. Their eyes reflected our lights like mirrors. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The creatures didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. Their bodies seemed to flow and shift in ways that defied physics. The whispers grew louder. Now I could finally make out words. "Hungry. So hungry. Feed us." Mike grabbed my arm. "We need to." A deafening screech cut him off. One of the creatures dropped from the ceiling, landing on the floor about 20 feet away. In the combined beams of our lights, I got my first clear look at it. The thing stood on 4 legs, each ending in massive curved claws. Its body was covered in sleek black fur that seemed to absorb light. The head was vaguely feline, but wrong, too angular, with too many eyes arranged in clusters. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. But the wrongest thing was how it moved, flowing like liquid mercury, its shape seeming to constantly shift and reorganize. As I watched, a 5th limb sprouted from its shoulder, then melted back into its body. "Back up," I whispered slowly. We began retreating into the tunnel. The creature watched us, its multiple eyes gleaming. The whispers had become a chorus now. "Stay. Feed us. Stay! Two more shapes dropped from above, blocking our retreat. They were smaller than the first, but just as wrong, their bodies rippling and changing as they moved toward us. Mike fumbled in his backpack and pulled out a flare. The creatures hesitated, their eyes fixed on the bright cylinder. "Ready?" he said. I nodded, though I had no idea what he was planning. He struck the flare. Brilliant red light filled the tunnel. The creatures recoiled, hissing. Their bodies seemed to become less solid, edges blurring and shifting faster. "They don't like light," Mike said. "Run." We sprinted back down the tunnel, Mike waving the flare behind us. I heard screeching and the sound of claws on metal, but didn't look back. We reached the outer hatch and practically dove through it. The maintenance platform was covered in creatures now, at least 6 of them crawling on the walls and ceiling, but they kept their distance from the flare's glow. "A ladder," I gasped. "Quick!" We half climbed, half slid down the ladder. The creatures followed, but stayed just outside the circle of red light. Their bodies flowed around each other like living shadows. The whispers had become angry now. "No escape. Need to feed. Stay with us." About halfway down, the flare started to sputter. The creatures sensed it, failing, and pressed closer. I could smell them now, an odd metallic odor mixed with something like ozone. "Almost there," Mike panted. "Keep going." The flare died just as our feet hit the ground floor. Instantly, the creatures surged down the walls toward us. We sprinted for the entrance, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly. Behind us, I heard bodies hitting the floor, claws scrabbling on concrete. We burst out of the silo into cool night air. I risked a glance back as we ran. The creatures had stopped at the entrance, their bodies roiling with frustration. They couldn't or wouldn't cross the threshold. We didn't stop running until we reached Mike's truck parked a quarter mile away. We jumped in and he gunned the engine, throwing gravel as we sped away. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Mike broke the silence. "What the hell were those things?" I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "I don't know, but they're trapped in there. We need to make sure they stay trapped." "Agreed. We'll call the police. Tell them we spotted suspicious activity. Get the place sealed up." I nodded. My hands were still shaking. "Think anyone will believe us if we tell them what we really saw?" "Probably not, but we know. And we'll make sure no one else goes in there." We drove in silence for a while. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me exhausted. But I knew sleep wouldn't come easily tonight, or for many nights to come. "Hey," Mike said suddenly. "You know what the weirdest part was?" "What?" "Those whispers. They sounded almost human, like they used to be human, but aren't anymore." A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't let myself think about that aspect of it, about what those things might once have been, before they changed into what we saw. We made an anonymous call to the police from a gas station payphone. Reported hearing strange noises and seeing lights in the abandoned silo. I asked him to check it out. A week later, we drove by and found the entrance welded shut, with no trespassing signs everywhere. Sometimes late at night, I still hear those whispers in my dreams. Still see those liquid shadow bodies flowing through darkness. Still wonder what they really were and what they might become if they ever got out. Mike and I still explore abandoned places sometimes, but we're more careful now. We watch for claw marks, listen for whispers, and always bring extra flares. The marks in the bark went up 15 feet high. My hand trembled as I ran my fingers over the deep gouges. Each groove was wide enough to fit 3 of my fingers. Whatever made these wasn't a bear, wasn't anything I'd ever seen in 20 years of hiking these mountains. The claw marks were still fresh, the exposed wood pale and raw in my flashlight beam. The hair on my neck stood up as I remembered those glowing red eyes from just minutes ago, hovering impossibly high above the ground. I should start from the beginning. My name is Jack Wheeler, and I've been doing solo night hikes in the Cascades for most of my adult life. There's something peaceful about walking the trails under starlight when the daytime crowds are gone and you can really hear the forest breathe. I know it sounds crazy to some people heading out alone after dark, but I've always felt more at ease in the wilderness than in the city. That changed last night. I'd parked my truck at the Copper Creek trailhead around 8 p.m., just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was early October, crisp but not cold yet, with a bright 3/4 moon rising over the ridgeline. Perfect conditions for a night hike. I packed lightly, just water, some trail mix, my hiking poles, and my usual LED headlamp, plus a backup flashlight. The forecast showed clear skies until morning. The first 2 hours were exactly what I'd come for. The moonlight painted everything in soft silver. Owls called back and forth in the distance. My boots crunched quietly on the gravel trail as I made my way deeper into the valley. I passed the turnoff for Summit Lake, staying on the main trail as it wound through stands of ancient Douglas fir. Their massive trunks rose like columns in the darkness. Around 10:30, I stopped at one of my favorite rest spots, a fallen log beside a small stream. I killed my headlamp to let my eyes adjust fully to the moonlight. The water whispered over rocks. Wind stirred the canopy far overhead. This was my element. I felt the day's tension melting away as I sat there munching trail mix, just soaking in the night forest. That's when I first heard it. A crack of breaking wood, sharp and sudden, maybe 50 yards up the slope to my right. My hand froze, halfway to my mouth. I've heard plenty of nighttime forest sounds, deer moving through brush, branches falling. But this was different, heavier, more deliberate. Another crack followed closer this time. Something big was moving parallel to the trail, heading in my direction. I clicked my headlamp back on, swinging the beam toward the sound. The light caught nothing but tree trunks and understory ferns, but the movement continued, punctuated by snapping branches and a new sound, a wet, rhythmic huffing like heavy breathing. Everything in me screamed to get moving, but I forced myself to stay still, controlling my own breathing. Most large animals will avoid humans if you give them space. Running can trigger a chase response. I'd encountered black bears before. This was probably just another bear, though they rarely move around much at night. The huffing breath grew louder, closer. I could hear vegetation being pushed aside, and my headlamp beam darted between trees trying to catch movement. And then I saw them, two glowing red eyes reflecting my light from at least 12 feet off the ground. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. Bears don't get that tall. Mountain lions don't get that tall. Nothing gets that tall. The eyes blinked. The huffing stopped. For a long moment there was complete silence, except for my pounding heart. Then the eyes moved, not forward but up, rising smoothly until they had to be 15 feet high. A darker shape blocked out the stars behind it, but in the dim light I could make out its form clearly. My headlamp beam seemed to slide off it like oil on water. I heard myself make a sound, a small choked noise of pure animal fear. The red eyes snapped to focus directly on me. The thing moved, fast, not toward me, but parallel to the trail again, gliding between the trees with impossible silence now. The eyes remained fixed on me the whole time, burning in the darkness. I caught glimpses of long limbs, too many limbs moving with fluid grace. My paralysis broke. I grabbed my pack and poles and began walking quickly down the trail, fighting the urge to run. The eyes paced me, staying just visible through the trees. Every few seconds they would rise higher then drop lower as if the creature was flowing up and down the trunks. But it never made a sound now. After about 100 yards of this terrible game, the eyes suddenly rose straight up higher than before. Then they vanished, just winking out like someone flipping a switch. I stood frozen, straining to hear any movement. Nothing. The forest had gone completely silent. No owls, no wind, no small creatures moving in the brush. Just the thunder of blood in my ears. My trembling hand found my backup flashlight. I clicked it on and aimed it into the trees where I'd last seen the eyes. The powerful beam revealed nothing but normal forest. I played it back and forth, searching. That's when I saw the marks. They started about 4 feet up the trunk of a massive fir tree, 4 parallel gouges, each as wide as my palm, raked upward through the bark. They continued up and up and up, far higher than any animal could reach, 15 feet at least. The exposed wood was pale and fresh. These marks had just been made. I found more on the next tree, and the next. A trail of massive claw marks led up the slope, marking the creature's passage. In some places the gouges went completely around the trunk, as if the thing had flowed around the tree as it climbed. I had to know, it was stupid, probably suicidal, but I had to see more. I left the trail, following the line of marked trees up the slope. My lights revealed more details, places where the forest floor had been scraped clean of vegetation, leaving parallel furrows in the soil. Broken branches hung overhead, some as thick as my arms, snapped like twigs. The trail of destruction led to a small clearing. What I found there made me question everything I thought I knew about the natural world. The ground was covered in deep impressions, not footprints exactly, but smoothly scooped depressions in the soil, as if something incredibly heavy had flowed across the ground like liquid. They led to the base of the largest tree I'd ever seen in these woods, an ancient cedar. Its trunk was wider than a car. The claw marks here were different. They spiraled up the trunk, wrapping around it again and again, reaching higher than my lights could penetrate. But what stopped me cold was what I found at the base of the tree. Scattered across the ground were what looked like shed scales, dozens of them, ranging from the size of my palm to bigger than dinner plates. They were paper thin but hard as steel when I picked one up. The surface was iridescent black, shot through with patterns that seemed to shift and move in my light. The edges were razor sharp. That's when I heard the huffing again, from somewhere far above. I dropped the scale and ran. I'd like to say I made a controlled descent back to the trail, but that would be a lie. I crashed through brush and stumbled down the slope, my lights bouncing wildly. Behind and above me, something moved through the canopy. Breaking branches crashed down around me. Those burning eyes appeared and disappeared between the trees, always higher up, pacing me back to the trail. I hit the main trail hard, nearly falling. Without hesitation, I turned downhill and began to run. I'm in good shape. The terror gave me wings. I covered the 3 miles back to my truck in what felt like minutes, though my watch later told me it was almost an hour. The whole time I felt those eyes watching from the darkness above, but they never came closer. Never moved to attack, just watched. I didn't stop running until I reached the parking lot. As I fumbled for my truck keys, I looked back one last time. There, at the edge of my headlamp's reach, 2 red eyes floated in the darkness. They had to be 30 feet up. As I watched, they rose smoothly higher and higher until they disappeared above the trees. A moment later, a sound rolled down the valley, not quite a roar, not quite a scream, but something between the two. It echoed off the mountains, making my truck windows vibrate. Then silence returned. I broke several speed limits getting home. Once there, I spent hours researching online, looking for any similar encounters. I found nothing that matched what I'd seen. The closest were some old Native American legends about a creature they called the night climber or tree walker, a thing that moved through the forest canopy after dark, marking its territory with claw marks that went impossibly high. The story said it was ancient, intelligent, and fiercely territorial, but also said it never harmed humans who didn't threaten it directly. I've gone back to that trail 3 times since then, always in daylight. The claw marks are still there, though they're starting to weather. I found more of those strange scales in places where the canopy has been broken and twisted as if something massive moved through it. But I haven't seen those eyes again. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I wonder if the creature recognized something in me. Another solitary night walker, someone who loved its forest realm. Maybe that's why it let me go. Or maybe it was just marking its territory, warning me away from its hunting grounds. I still hike at night sometimes, but never alone now. And never on that trail again. The forest feels different to me now. Bigger, older, full of mysteries we've forgotten, or chosen to ignore. There are things in the dark spaces of the world that defy our comfortable categories. Things that move between the trees, like living shadows. I know because I saw one. The claw marks prove I'm not crazy. They're still there, 15 feet up ancient trunks, slowly healing but never quite disappearing. Sometimes I drive, headed out just to look at them, to remind myself that it was real. But I don't stay after dark anymore. And when I hear branches breaking in the night forest, I think about those burning eyes rise impossibly high in the darkness. I think about fluid grace and razor-sharp scales. And I wonder if it's watching me even now, flowing through the canopy far above, marking its territory one massive tree at a time. The thing that haunts me most isn't the fear I felt that night. It's the realization that we know so little about the world around us. We think we've explored every corner, cataloged every species. But there are things out there that don't fit in our neat biological classifications. Things that move in ways that shouldn't be possible. Things with burning eyes that rise through the darkness. I still have one of those scales locked away in my desk drawer. But sometimes I take it out and watch the strange patterns shift across its surface in the light. It's my proof that the impossible exists. That somewhere out there in the deep forest night, something ancient and unknowable moves through the trees, marking its passage 15 feet high. I won't go looking for it again, but sometimes on quiet nights when the moon is bright, I hear distant branches breaking, and I wonder if it's out there, flowing between the trees, rising higher and higher into the darkness. Watching, waiting, marking its territory one massive trunk at a time. The forest belongs to it after dark. I know that now, and I'm content. Leave it to its domain, to stick to the daylight world where things make sense and claw marks don't go impossibly high into the canopy. But sometimes I dream of those burning eyes, and in my dream, they're always rising. The laughter started at 3:17 a.m. I checked my watch because the sound jolted me awake in my tent. It wasn't the cheerful kind of laughter you hear at parties. It was deep, echoing through the trees, and it made the hair on my neck stand up. I was camping with 4 friends: Pete, Mike, Sarah, and Rachel in the Cascade Mountains. We'd picked a remote spot about 6 miles from the nearest road. The closest town was Pine Grove, population 84-2. We were experienced campers, but nothing prepared us for what happened that weekend. The laughter came again. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere to the east of our campsite. Pete unzipped his tent and stuck his head out. "You guys hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah," Mike answered from his tent. "What the hell is it?" Sarah and Rachel were sharing the tent next to mine. I heard them whispering to each other. The laughter echoed through the trees again, this time longer. It bounced off the trunks. It seemed to come from everywhere, at once. "Must be the ghost of the forest," Rachel said, trying to make a joke. Her voice shook slightly. "Shut up," Sarah replied. "That's not funny." I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent. The beam cut through the darkness between the trees. Nothing moved except shadows cast by the branches swaying in the light breeze. The air felt colder than it had when we went to bed. "I'm gonna check it out," I said, pulling on my boots. "Don't be stupid, Jack," Sarah called out. "It's probably just some drunk hikers." 6 miles from the nearest road, Pete asked. I stepped out of my tent. The ground felt soft under my boots from the rain earlier that day. My flashlight beam showed wet pine needles covering the dirt. The laughter came again, and this time I could tell it was definitely from the east, maybe a quarter mile away. "I'm coming with you," Pete said, climbing out of his tent. He was already dressed and had his hiking boots on. Mike joined us too. Sarah and Rachel stayed in their tent but watched as we headed east through the trees, our flashlight beams bouncing off the trunks and creating moving shadows that made me jump more than once. The ground sloped up gradually. Pine needles crunched under our boots. Laughter echoed again. It was closer now, maybe a few hundred yards away. It sounded deeper than before, almost like it was coming from underground. "This is stupid," Mike whispered. "We should go back." "In a minute," I said. "I just want to see what it is." We crested a small rise, and our flashlights illuminated a clearing ahead. The trees opened up into a roughly circular space, about 50 feet across. The ground was bare dirt here, with hardly any pine needles. Laughter boomed again, definitely coming from the clearing. We froze. My heart pounded in my chest. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. "Look," Pete whispered, pointing his flashlight. In the middle of the clearing were 3 rectangular holes in the ground. They were about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, freshly dug. They looked exactly like graves. My mouth went dry. The holes were neat and precise, with straight sides and flat bottoms. The dirt piled next to them was dark and damp. Someone had dug these recently. "We need to get out of here," Mike said. His voice cracked. Laughter erupted again, louder than ever. It seemed to come from directly below us. The sound vibrated in my chest. We ran. We crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the noise. Branches whipped my face. I tripped on a root and nearly fell, but Pete grabbed my arm and kept me upright. Laughter followed us, growing louder and deeper. It echoed off the trees until it seemed to come from all directions. We burst into our campsite. Sarah and Rachel were outside their tent now, flashlights in hand. "What happened?" Sarah asked. "We heard you running. We need to leave," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "Now what did you see?" Rachel demanded. "Graves," Pete panted. "Fresh ones." The laughter boomed through the trees again. Sarah screamed. Rachel dropped her flashlight. "Get your stuff," Mike ordered. "Only grab what you can quickly. Leave the tents." We grabbed our backpacks and essential gear. My hands shook as I stuffed my sleeping bag into its compression sack. The laughter came again, closer now. It had a rhythmic quality, almost like someone was trying to speak through it. We left everything else and started hiking west toward the road. The moon had set, and it was pitch black between the trees. Our flashlight beams bounced wildly as we half walked, half ran through the forest. The laughter followed us. Sometimes it seemed far away, sometimes right behind us. Once I could have sworn it came from directly above, as if someone was in the tree branches over our heads. We hiked for hours in the dark. Nobody spoke except to warn about obstacles or steep spots. The sky began to lighten in the east. As soon as there was enough light to see, we picked up our pace. We reached the road just as the sun cleared the mountains. A pickup truck was parked in the small gravel lot where we'd left our cars. An old man in a Forest Service uniform was checking the bulletin board. As we approached, he turned. "You folks okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." We told him what happened, about the laughter and the holes in the clearing. His face grew serious. "Show me," he said. We let him back up the trail. None of us wanted to go, but we had to show him. It took 2 hours to reach our campsite. Our tents were still there, undisturbed. We continued east to the clearing. In daylight, it looked different, smaller. The bare dirt was covered in pine needles, just like everywhere else. There were no holes. The ground was undisturbed, no sign that anyone had ever dug there. But they were right here. Pete insisted. 3 holes, perfectly rectangular. The ranger walked around the clearing, studying the ground. He knelt and picked something up, a small brass bell, green with age. He turned it over in his hand. "Every few years," he said slowly, "hikers report hearing laughter in these woods. Always at night, always in this area. Sometimes they find holes, like graves, but the holes are always gone by morning." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "There used to be a logging camp here back in the 1930s. The story goes that one of the loggers was a practical joker. He loved frightening the other men. He'd hide in the woods at night and laugh, trying to scare them. One night he went too far, fell into a sinkhole while setting up one of his pranks. They never found his body. He held up the bell. He used to carry bells like this. He said they made his laugh echo better." The ranger stood up. "Best to avoid camping in this area. Some things are better left alone." We hiked back to our campsite in silence. We packed up our tents and gear quickly, nobody wanting to stay any longer than necessary. As we walked back to the road, I thought about what the ranger said, about things better left alone, about jokes that go too far. Just before we reached the road, the laughter echoed through the trees one last time. Faint and far away, but unmistakable. And this time I could have sworn I heard the tiny tinkle of a bell mixed in with it. We never went camping in those woods again. Sometimes I drive past that area and I always wonder about those holes we saw, about why they disappeared, about what might have happened if we'd stayed longer that night. But mostly I wonder about that laughter and whether the old logger is still out there, playing his jokes on anyone who ventures too deep into his woods. I've heard other stories since then about hikers finding more holes in different parts of the forest, about laughter echoing through the trees on dark nights. The ranger retired years ago, but the new ones tell the same stories. They say if you camp in those woods and hear laughter in the night, the best thing to do is pack up and leave. Don't investigate, don't try to find the source, and whatever you do, don't laugh back. Because sometimes on the darkest nights, when the moon is hidden and the wind is still, the thing in the woods is listening, waiting for someone to join in its laughter, waiting for someone to play along with its joke. I still have nightmares about that night, about the holes in the clearing, about the laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But what really keeps me awake at night is the thought that maybe, just maybe, we weren't hearing the echo of an old logger's joke. Maybe we were hearing something else. Something that's still out there in those woods, digging holes in the dark and laughing at its own private joke. Something that's still waiting for someone to laugh back. The ranger retired 5 years ago. I ran into him at the grocery store in Pine Grove last month. He looked older, more tired. I asked him if he still had that old brass bell. He shook his head. "Lost it," he said. "Or something took it. Went back to that clearing a week after I showed it to you folks. It was gone." He leaned close and lowered his voice. "But you know what's strange? Sometimes on quiet nights, I can hear it, just the faintest little tinkle, mixed in with that laughter, and it seems to be getting closer to town every year. I don't go hiking anymore. I sold my camping gear. I moved to the city where the only sounds at night are traffic and sirens. But sometimes when the wind is right and the night is dark, I think I can hear it. That deep, echoing laughter carried on the breeze from the distant mountains. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear the tiny sound of a brass bell tinkling in the darkness, waiting, I've been farming this land for 23 years and know every inch of these fields. I put those scarecrows up myself, 3 of them spaced out across my cornfields. I hammered the posts into the ground with my own hands. They haven't moved in 5 years, until now. I first noticed it last Tuesday morning. I was doing my usual dawn check of the fields, coffee in hand, boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. The scarecrow in the east field wasn't where it should be. Instead of facing north like I'd said it was turned northwest toward the barn. I walked over to check it. The wooden post was still firmly in the ground, but the body had twisted on its mount. Must be the wind, I told myself. We'd had some strong gusts the night before. I turned it back to face north and went about my day. The next morning it had moved again. This time it was facing west, and its arms hung at different angles than I'd left them. The burlap sack it used for its head was tilted to one side like it was looking at something. I checked the post again, solid as ever. No signs of rot or weakness that would let it twist in the wind. I adjusted it back to normal, but my hands were shaking. The morning felt colder than it should have. That afternoon, I drove into town and bought some heavy-duty zip ties from the hardware store. I used them to secure the scarecrow's crossbar to the post. Triple-checked that everything was tight and couldn't move. The next morning, the zip ties were broken. Snapped clean through. The scarecrow faced south now, toward my house. Its arms were raised higher than they'd ever been before. I called my neighbor Mike to come take a look. He's been farming longer than I have. Thought maybe he's seen something like this before. He checked the post, the mountings, everything. Could be kids messing with you, he said, but his voice was tight. He didn't sound convinced. Out here, 3 miles from the nearest house, I shook my head. And look at those zip ties, brand new.
That's not kids.
Mike left without saying much else. I noticed he drove faster than usual down my access road. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to look out my bedroom window at the fields. The security light on my barn cast long shadows across the corn. The scarecrows were dark shapes against the night sky. I watched until my eyes burned, but they didn't move. At 3 a.m., I got up to make coffee. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I spilled grounds all over the counter. While I was cleaning them up, movement caught my eye through the kitchen window. The East Field scarecrow was walking toward my house. My coffee mug hit the floor and shattered. I didn't even notice the hot liquid splashing my legs. The scarecrow moved with a slow, uneven gait. Its legs didn't bend right. The burlap head swayed with each step. The arm swung loosely, too long for its body. I backed away from the window. My breath came in short gasps. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool night air. My phone was on the kitchen table and I grabbed it with slippery fingers to try to take a video, but my hands were shaking too badly. The scarecrow kept coming. It was 20 yards from my house now. Its movements were jerky, like a puppet with tangled strings. The moonlight showed the rough texture of its burlap head, the frayed edges of its old flannel shirt. I ran to my gun safe and fumbled with the combination, getting it wrong twice before my fingers remembered the right sequence. I grabbed my shotgun and loaded it. The shells clattered on the floor as I dropped them. I picked them up and tried again. Back at the kitchen window, the scarecrow was 10 yards away now. It was close enough to see the stitches in its clothes, the straw poking out at odd angles. Its head was cocked to one side, and the crude face I'd painted on the burlap years ago looked darker than it should have been. My hands steadied on the shotgun. I dealt with trespassers before, handled wild animals threatening my livestock. But the scarecrow stopped. It stood perfectly still, its arms hanging at its sides. It was 5 yards from my front porch. The security light threw its shadow across my lawn, impossibly long and wrong. I opened my mouth to shout, to challenge it, but no sound came out. My throat was too dry. The scarecrow's head turned, not the whole body, just the head, rotating slowly to face my window. The painted eyes were wet. They blinked. I stumbled backward, knocking over a kitchen chair. It crashed to the floor. When I looked up again, the scarecrow was gone. The sun came up 3 hours later. I hadn't moved from my kitchen. The shotgun was still in my hands. My fingers crammed around it. Empty coffee cups littered the counter. I'd made pot after pot, anything to stay awake. I forced myself to go outside. The morning dew soaked my shoes as I walked to where the scarecrow had stood. The grass was undisturbed, with no footprints or signs that anything had been there. But when I looked out at the east field, the scarecrow was back on its post, facing north. arms out, exactly as I'd originally placed it. The old flannel shirt and jeans were weathered and dirty, just like always. The burlap head was lifeless. Its painted face had faded by sun and rain. I called in sick to my part-time job at the grain elevator, spent the morning making calls. The police listened politely but didn't send anyone out. The county extension office had no advice. My insurance agent laughed, then stopped when he realized I wasn't joking. That afternoon, I drove to every farm supply store within 50 miles, bought new scarecrows, modern ones made of plastic and metal. No cloth, no straw, no burlap. I replaced all 3 of my old scarecrows, burning the old ones in a barrel behind my barn. The burlap heads took a long time to catch fire. The new scarecrows worked fine for 2 days. They stayed where I put them. Their metal poles didn't move. Their plastic faces stayed fixed in the same expressions. Until last night. I was lying in bed, listening to the wind outside, when I heard it. A scraping sound like metal dragging across dirt. Then footsteps, different ones than before. Mechanical, regular. The sound of plastic feet on my gravel driveway. I looked out my window. All 3 new scarecrows were walking toward my house. Their movements were precise, coordinated. Their plastic faces reflected the security light. They moved together like soldiers marching. I ran, got in my truck and drove to Mike's house. Spent the night on his couch, drinking his whiskey while he cleaned his rifle and tried to tell me stories about rational explanations for everything. This morning, the new scarecrows were back on their poles, standing exactly where I'd put them. Their plastic faces smiled at nothing. I'm writing this at Mike's kitchen table. He's making calls, trying to find someone who knows something about this kind of thing. His wife is looking up, searching for scarecrow information on the internet, but all she's finding are Halloween decoration ads. I have to go back to my farm. The corn needs tending, and the equipment needs maintenance. I can't abandon everything I've built. But I know what I'll do first. I'm gonna take down every scarecrow, leave the fields empty, let the crows come. They can eat all my corn if they want. Because last night, while I was watching those plastic scarecrows march toward my house, I saw something worse. Movement in my rearview mirror as I drove away. The burned remains of the old scarecrows rising from the ashes behind my barn, charred burlap and blackened straw piecing themselves back together. And through my open truck window, carried on the night wind, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of straw rustling against burned cloth, the creak of ancient wood, and underneath it all, something that might have been laughter. I am going back today. I'll take down the scarecrows, fill that burn barrel with cement, sell the farm if I have to. But first, I need to know something. I need to look inside those plastic faces, see what's looking back at me through those painted eyes. I need to understand what's happening to my farm. Mike's loading his rifle. His wife is calling a realtor just in case. The sun is going down. It's time to go home. The headlights of my Honda Civic cut through the darkness on Interstate 80, somewhere between Omaha and Lincoln. It was 2:47 a.m., according to the green dashboard display. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight, and the coffee from my last stop had gone cold in the cup holder. I reached up to adjust the rearview mirror. The glare from a truck behind me had been hitting my eyes for the last 10 minutes. That's when I saw him. A man in a gray hoodie sitting perfectly still in my back seat. His face was hidden in shadow. My hands clenched the steering wheel. My heart stopped, then started hammering against my ribs. I jerked my head around to look at the back seat. Empty. Just my duffel bag and some trash from the drive-thru. My foot slammed on the brake pedal. The car skidded. A horn blasted behind me. I yanked the wheel right, tires screeching as I swerved onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the wheels. I hit the hazard lights and put the car in park, my hands shaking. "Get it together," I said out loud. My voice sounded wrong in the quiet car. "You're tired. You're seeing things." I grabbed my phone from the passenger seat and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across the back seat. Nothing. Just shadows and empty space. My breathing started to slow down. Then I saw it. A handprint on the rear passenger window, clear as day, pressed against the glass from the inside. Not small like a kid's hand, a full-sized adult palm and fingers. My throat closed up. Sweat ran down my back, soaking my t-shirt. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car, legs wobbling. The night air hit me like a slap. Semi-trucks roared past on the interstate, their wind buffeting my clothes. I walked around to the passenger side, phone light trained on the window. The handprint was still there. I could see each fingerprint, the lines of the palm, like someone had pressed their hand against the glass with all their strength. I opened the back door. The dome light came on. Empty seats. My duffel bag hadn't moved. The McDonald's bag was still crumpled in the footwell. I touched the window where the handprint was. The glass felt icy cold. I checked under both seats, behind them and in the trunk. Nothing but my spare tire and jumper cables. I even checked the front seats, like someone could be hiding there. The car was empty. Back outside, I walked a complete circle around the vehicle. No one hiding underneath, no one in the ditches along the shoulder. Just darkness and endless cornfields beyond the guardrail. My phone showed 3 bars of service. I could call the police. But what would I say? I saw someone in my rearview mirror who wasn't there, and now there's a handprint. They'd think I was drunk or high. I got back into the driver's seat and locked all the doors. The dashboard clock read 2:52 a.m. 5 minutes had passed since I'd seen the figure in the mirror. My hands were still trembling. The sensible thing would be to find a hotel and get some sleep. But the next exit was 30 miles away, according to the last sign I'd passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to keep moving. I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. Empty back seat. But the handprint was still visible when headlights hit the window at the right angle. The radio had been playing classic rock, but now it was just static. I hit scan. Static on every station. I turned it off. A sign appeared in my headlights. Rest area 2 miles. My bladder tightened. I'd been holding it since my last stop, trying to make good time. But the idea of pulling into a deserted rest area in the middle of nowhere made my skin crawl. I passed the exit. 10 minutes later, my teeth were floating. I'd have to stop eventually. The next sign showed a town called Henderson, population 105 miles ahead. The exit ramp curved through empty fields. No streetlights, just my headlights illuminating the pavement ahead. The stop sign emerged from the darkness. I turned right onto what looked like the town's main street. Clothes shops lined both sides. A hardware store, a diner, and a small grocery. All dark. No cars parked anywhere. No lights in any windows. My headlights caught a sign for a 24-hour gas station. An arrow pointing left. I turned onto a side street. The gas station's fluorescent lights made a pool of harsh white light in the darkness. A single car was parked by the building. Probably the clerk's. I pulled up to a pump and shut off the engine. Through the store windows, I could see someone behind the counter reading a magazine. The sight of another human being loosened some of the tension in my chest. The handprint was still there on the window. I'd been hoping it would somehow disappear while I was driving, like waking up from a bad dream. But the stark lighting from the gas station revealed every detail. I got out and started pumping gas. The numbers on the digital display ticked up slowly. Wind rustled through the cornfields beyond the station's lot. A moth fluttered around the lights overhead. The pump clicked off at 47. I hung up the nozzle and headed inside. A bell chimed as I opened the door. Cold air conditioning hit me. The clerk looked up from his magazine. Mid-50s, balding, with wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag said Steve. Evening, he said, and glanced at the clock on the wall. Morning, I guess. Hi. My voice was hoarse. I cleared my throat. Bathroom. He pointed to a door-marked restroom in the back corner. I grabbed a Mountain Dew and a bag of chips on my way. The bathroom was small, but clean. I took care of business, then splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, my eyes were bloodshot, with dark circles underneath. I looked exactly like someone who'd been driving all night and seeing things that weren't there. When I came out, Steve was still reading his magazine, Popular Mechanics. I set my stuff on the counter. "Is your Civic out there?" he asked as he rang me up. My stomach tightened. "Yeah, why?" Noticed the handprint on the window. Weird place for one. I swallowed. "Yeah, I've been meaning to clean it off." He looked at me over his glasses. Inside of the window, though, don't see that much. My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "Well, looking at it from here, the prints are on the inside of the glass. See how the fingers are pressed flat? If it was on the outside, they'd be curved the other way." I turned and looked through the store windows. From this angle, I could see he was right. The handprint was definitely on the inside of the glass. "You okay, son?" "You're looking a bit pale." "I'm fine. Just tired." Long drive. I handed him 320s. Keep the change. Back in the car, I sat with the engine off, staring at the handprint in my side mirror. Steve was right. The fingers were pressed flat against the glass from the inside. How had I not noticed that before? The Mountain Dew fizzed when I opened it. I drank half in one long swallow. The caffeine and sugar hit my system, sharpening everything slightly. I had two choices. I could find a hotel in this town and try to sleep, then deal with this in daylight. Or I could push through the last 3 hours to Lincoln, where my brother was expecting me in the morning. The gas station's lights flickered just for a second, but enough to make my decision. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. Back on the main street, I passed the dark shops again. In my mirror, I saw Steve come out of the station and watch my car until I turned onto the highway entrance ramp. The Mountain Dew kept me alert as cornfields rolled past in the darkness. I turned the radio back on. It was still static. I popped in an old CD instead, Foo Fighters. The familiar music helped steady my nerves. Every few minutes, my eyes went to the rearview mirror, empty back seat, but the handprint remained, a constant reminder that something impossible had happened. I tried to think rationally. Maybe someone had broken into my car while I was sleeping at the last rest stop, but I hadn't slept since starting the drive. Could someone have gotten in while I was getting coffee at that truck stop outside Omaha? The doors had been locked. A pair of headlights appeared in my mirror, gaining rapidly. As they got closer, I could see it was a police cruiser. My hands tightened on the wheel. The cruiser pulled alongside me. I kept my eyes straight ahead, maintaining exactly 70 miles per hour. In my peripheral vision, I saw the officer looking at my car, looking at the handprint. The cruiser accelerated and pulled ahead. I let out the breath I'd been holding, but instead of disappearing into the distance, the police car slowed down. Red and blue lights flashed on. My stomach dropped. I signaled and pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. The cruiser stopped 20 feet ahead. I kept my hands on the wheel, heart pounding. The officer got out and walked toward my car, flashlight beam bouncing. I powered down my window. License and registration. A female voice, businesslike. The flashlight beam swept across my face, then around the inside of the car. I reached slowly for the glove compartment, pulled out the registration, got my wallet from my back pocket, and handed both items over. She studied them with the flashlight. Mr. James Parker. Yes, ma'am. Were you headed tonight? Lincoln. Visiting my brother. It was a long drive this late. Yes, ma'am. I wanted to avoid traffic. The flashlight beam moved to the back seat, lingered on the handprint. Step out of the car, please. My legs were shaky as I got out. The officer was shorter than me, but her uniform and stance radiated authority. Mind telling me about that handprint? I'm not sure where it came from. I noticed it earlier tonight. She walked around to the passenger side, shining the light on the window. Inside of the glass recently made from the looks of it. You've been giving anyone a ride tonight, Mr. Parker? No, ma'am. I've been driving alone since Omaha. Mind if I take a look in your car? What could I say? Go ahead. She opened the back door. The dome light revealed empty seats. She checked under them, behind them, opened the trunk, and did exactly what I had done at the gas station. Popped the hood. I reached in and pulled the release lever. She spent several minutes checking the engine compartment, though I wasn't sure what she expected to find there. Finally, she closed the hood. You've been drinking tonight, Mr. Parker? No, ma'am. Any drugs? Prescription medication? No, ma'am. She studied my face. You look tired. Been driving since Des Moines. She handed back my license and registration. There's a town called Henderson about 10 miles back. It has a decent motel. I'd strongly suggest you stop there for the night. Yes, ma'am. I will. She started walking back to her cruiser, then stopped. One more thing. That handprint, it's fresh. Oils from skin don't stay visible on glass more than a few hours. Whatever made that print, it happened tonight. She got in her car and pulled away, leaving me standing on the shoulder. The wind had picked up, rustling through the cornfields. I got back in my car and locked the doors. The dashboard clock read 3:47 a.m. The handprint was still visible in the glow from the instrument panel. Fresh. The officer had said, made tonight. I turned the key, the engine coughed once, then started. I pulled back onto the highway, heading for Henderson. The officer was right. I needed sleep. Everything would make more sense in daylight. The town's lights appeared ahead. I took the exit, retracing my path past the gas station. Steve's car was gone now. The fluorescent lights buzzed over empty parking spaces. The motel was a single-story building on the edge of town. A vacancy sign flickered in red neon. I parked in front of the office and went inside. The night clerk was a young guy with acne and a University of Nebraska sweatshirt. He barely looked up from his phone as he took my credit card and handed over a room key. Room 1114, at the end of the building. I drove down to the last room. The key stuck in the lock for a moment before it turned. Inside, the room smelled of old cigarettes despite the no smoking sign on the door. One queen bed, a TV bolted to the wall, a small bathroom. I brought in my duffel bag and double-checked all the locks. The handprint was still visible on my car window through the thin curtains. The bed creaked when I sat down. I should call my brother, let him know I'd be late, but my phone showed no signal and the room's landline was dead. I took a quick shower, then lay down fully clothed on top of the covers. The air conditioning rattled. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway. Sleep came in fits and starts. Every noise jolted me awake. The ice machine down the hall, doors opening and closing, voices passing outside. Around 6 a.m., gray light started seeping around the curtains. I got up and looked outside. My car sat where I'd left it. The handprint was gone. I packed quickly and checked out. The morning clerk was an older woman who didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. In daylight, the town looked less threatening. A few cars were parked along the main street. Smoke rose from the diner's chimney. The gas station where it stopped was busy with morning commuters. I got back on the highway, 2 more hours to Lincoln. The morning sun made everything seem normal, rational. I'd been tired, seeing things. The handprint had been there. Yes, but there had to be a logical explanation. My brother was waiting on his front porch when I pulled up. He waved as I got out of the car. "You look like hell," he said. "Rough drive?" I looked at the rear passenger window. Clean glass, no trace of the handprint. "You could say that." "Well, come on in. Coffee's hot. You can tell me all about it." I followed him inside, leaving the car in the driveway. But I kept the keys in my pocket, and I knew I'd be checking the back seat before getting in again. Some things you can't explain away even in daylight. Some things stick with you like a handprint on glass. There one moment, gone the next. But leaving traces you can never quite erase. I still check over my shoulder when I hike, even 3 years after what happened on the Appalachian Trail. The doctors say my leg is healed completely, but I feel phantom pains when the weather turns cold. Sometimes I wake up sweating, thinking I hear that sound again, that deep wet breathing in the dark. I'd been hiking solo for 15 years before that trip. Started right after college, working remote IT jobs that let me spend weeks at a time on various trails. That spring, I'd planned a month-long section hike through the more remote parts of Georgia and North Carolina. The weather forecast looked perfect. Cool nights, clear days, low chance of rain. The first 4 days went exactly as planned. I maintained a steady pace of 15 miles per day, stopping at established campsites, filtering water from streams, and enjoying the solitude. I passed a few other hikers, but mostly had the trail to myself. The leaves were just starting to bud, and visibility through the forest was good. On the 5th day, things changed. I noticed the birds had gone quiet around mid-afternoon. Not gradually, 1 minute they were singing, the next complete silence. I've spent enough time in the woods to know that's usually a warning sign, but I couldn't see anything unusual, and my phone's weather app showed clear skies with no storms approaching. I kept hiking, but found myself scanning the trees more often. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my ears. My boots crunched too loudly on the dead leaves. I adjusted my pack straps, though they didn't need adjusting. I checked my water bottle, though it was still nearly full. Small nervous habits that I couldn't quite control. The first time I heard it, I almost convinced myself it was just the wind, a long rattling exhale somewhere behind me on the trail. But the leaves weren't moving, and the air was completely still. I stopped walking, turned slowly in a full circle, examining the forest around me. The trail stretched empty in both directions. No movement in the underbrush, no signs of bears or other large animals, just that unnatural silence, broken only by my own breathing and heartbeats. I started walking again, faster now. The sun was getting low and I needed to find a campsite before dark. The breathing sound came again, closer this time. unmistakable, like someone with pneumonia taking deep, wet breaths. I spun around, hiking poles raised defensively, nothing there, just empty trail and motionless trees. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin and weak in the dead air. No response. I broke into a jog, my pack bouncing awkwardly on my shoulders. The breathing followed, always just behind me, never quite close enough to touch. My lungs burned. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool air. I ran until I spotted a small clearing about 50 feet off the trail. It wasn't an official campsite, but it would have to do. My hands shook as I set up my tent, fumbling with the poles and stakes. The breathing had stopped, but the silence felt like it was watching me. I didn't bother cooking dinner, just ate a protein bar and some trail mix in my tent, checking my phone every few minutes. No signal. The battery was at 47%. I turned it off to conserve power. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually won out. I dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every small sound, a branch creaking, leaves rustling, or just my own movement against the sleeping bag. Around 3 a.m. the breathing started again. Close, right outside my tent. The nylon wall seemed absurdly thin. I lay completely still, barely daring to breathe myself. The sound moved slowly around the tent's perimeter, once, twice, 3 times, then stopped at the door. I clutched my hunting knife, though I knew it would be useless against anything large enough to make breathing that deep. The silence stretched out, broken only by my pounding heart. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt frozen. Finally, the breathing moved away. I heard heavy footsteps crunching through the leaves, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. The normal night sounds of the forest gradually returned, crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance. I didn't sleep again, just lay there knife in hand watching the tent wall slowly brighten as dawn approached. When the sun finally rose, I waited another hour before unzipping the tent. The clearing looked normal in the morning light, but then I saw the tracks. Massive footprints pressed deep into the soil, circling my tent exactly where I'd heard the breathing. Each print was nearly 2 feet long, with what looked like 5 toes, but proportioned all wrong, too wide, too deep. The stride length between prints was impossible for any known animal. I followed the tracks. They led from the trail to my tent, circled it 3 times, then headed toward the edge of the clearing. Beyond that lay a steep drop-off, a rocky cliff falling away at least 100 feet to the valley below. The tracks went right to the edge and simply stopped, as if whatever made them had simply vanished into thin air. I broke camp in record time, my hands still shaking as I stuffed gear into my pack. The silence had returned. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my own ragged breathing as I worked. I shouldered my pack and headed back to the trail, moving as quickly as I could while still watching my surroundings. The morning sun felt weak and distant. The forest looked wrong somehow. The shadows were too dark, the spaces between trees too deep. My breathing started again around noon. I was pushing hard, trying to make it to the next shelter before dark. The sound came from behind me, closer than ever. Hot, wet air brushed the back of my neck. I ran, full sprint. My pack bounced painfully against my back. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to see what was making those heavy footfalls that shook the ground with each step. My breathing got closer, closer. A low growl mixed with the wet rasping. My boot caught on a root. I went down hard, my pack twisting awkwardly beneath me. Pain shot through my right leg. Something warm and wet soaked through my pants. Blood from where the root had torn my shin open. I rolled onto my back, expecting to finally see whatever had been stalking me. But there was nothing there. Just empty trail stretching away through the trees. My breathing had stopped. My leg hurt too much to run. I pulled up my pant leg to examine the damage. A deep gash about 6 inches long was bleeding freely. I dug out my first aid kit with trembling hands and did my best to clean and bandage the wound. Standing was agony. The gash was right along my shin bone, and any pressure sent spikes of pain shooting up my leg. I used my hiking poles like crutches, keeping as much weight as possible off the injury. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I hobbled down the trail, jumping at every sound, expecting that wet breathing to start again at any moment. But there was only silence. Even the wind seemed to have died. I made it to the shelter just as the sun was setting. 2 other hikers were already there, a retired couple from Florida doing a section hike. They helped me clean my leg properly and insisted I take some ibuprofen. The woman, a former nurse, said I probably needed stitches. I didn't tell them about the breathing or the tracks, just said I tripped on a route while hiking too fast. They offered to help me hike out to the nearest road crossing in the morning, and I gratefully accepted. That night, I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the couple's quiet breathing and the normal sounds of the forest. No wet rasping, no heavy footsteps, but every time I closed my eyes, I felt hot breath on the back of my neck. We hiked out the next morning, 8 slow, painful miles to a gravel road where the couple called a shuttle service for me. The driver took me to an urgent care clinic in the nearest town, 12 stitches in my leg and a prescription for antibiotics. I took a bus home after that, leaving most of my gear behind at a hostel. Told myself I'd come back for it eventually, but I never did. I still hike sometimes, but never alone. Never in remote areas. And I always check the weather before I go out, not for rain or temperature, but for silence. That heavy, watching silence that comes before breathing starts. The leg healed clean, barely even a scar now. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I swear I can hear something moving outside my window. Something with heavy, wet breathing and footsteps that shake the ground. Something that leaves tracks that end at impossible places. I've researched everything I can find about that section of trail. Asked local hiking groups and park rangers about strange encounters. Most people just shrug it off. A few tell stories about missing hikers or unexplained sounds in the night. One old ranger mentioned Native American legends about a creature that stalks lone travelers, but he wouldn't say more. The only solid fact I found is this. Every few years, someone disappears from that stretch of trail. They find the camping gear, the backpack, the supplies, but no body, no signs of animal attack. Just tracks that end abruptly at cliff edges, or in the middle of clearings. I've thought about going back, setting up cameras, trying to document whatever it was that followed me. But then I remember that hot breath on my neck, those impossibly wide footprints, that sense of being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. And I stay home. The doctors say my leg is healed completely. But on quiet nights when the wind dies and the world goes silent, I feel phantom pains where that root tore my skin. And I wonder if it really was a root at all. If maybe something reached out from the shadows and marked me, letting me escape, but leaving a reminder that it could have taken so much more. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't walk in quiet places. I don't trust silence. And if you're ever on that stretch of the Appalachian Trail when the birds stop singing, don't look back. Just run. Run until you find other people, other voices, other sounds to drown out that wet, heavy breathing in the dark. The thing is, I've started to wonder lately if run even matters. Because sometimes when I'm driving alone at night or walking through an empty parking garage, I hear it again. That deep, rasping breath, those heavy footsteps. And I realize that maybe it didn't stay on the trail at all. Maybe it followed me home waiting for the right moment. The right silence to finish what it started. But I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to keep hiking with groups. Keep checking over my shoulder. Keep moving through well-populated areas. And if you're smart, you'll do the same. Because whatever was on that trail, whatever left those tracks that ended at the cliff edge, it's still out there, breathing, waiting, watching, and the silence is spreading. The scream hit me like a punch to the gut, high-pitched, desperate, the kind that makes your blood freeze. I jerked my head up from my phone, and my coffee spilled onto the truck's dashboard. 2:47 a.m., middle of nowhere, Arizona, and I was the only vehicle at this rest stop. Another scream pierced the night. Female, coming from the bathroom building, about 50 yards from where I'd parked. My hand was already on the door handle. 15 years of driving routes, and I'd never heard anything like it. The gravel crunched under my boots as I ran. The security light above the bathroom entrance buzzed and flickered, casting weird shadows. My breath came in short bursts. The screaming had stopped. I grabbed the handle of the women's bathroom door. The metal felt ice cold against my palm. Hello? Is anyone in there? Are you okay? No response. Just silence. I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked. A wall of humid air hit my face, thick and heavy like walking into a sauna. My t-shirt stuck to my skin instantly. Ma'am, I heard screaming. Do you need help? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 3 stall doors stood closed. Water dripped somewhere. The mirrors were completely fogged up, covered in beads of condensation that ran down in rivulets. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor as I moved forward. I pushed open the first stall door. Empty. The toilet seat was dry. The second stall was also empty. Not even a piece of toilet paper on the floor. The last stall door was different. Condensation covered every inch, but it seemed to be moving, flowing like water droplets crawling across the metal surface. My hand shook as I reached for it. The door swung open at my touch. Empty. Bone dry. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest. The air felt thick, almost solid. My skin crawled with goosebumps despite the humidity. A loud bang behind me. I spun around. The entrance door had slammed shut. I rushed to it, grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. I yanked harder. Nothing. The lights flickered once, twice. The humming grew louder, became a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned toward the mirrors. The condensation had cleared in one spot, about the size of a hand. As I watched, letters began appearing like someone writing with their finger. "Help us!" My legs went weak. I slammed my shoulder against the door. It burst open and I stumbled out into the cool night air. I ran to my truck, cranked the engine, and peeled out of there, gravel flying. I drove for 2 hours straight, before I felt safe enough to pull over. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called the state police, reported what happened. They sent a patrol car but found nothing unusual, just a normal rest stop bathroom. That was 3 months ago. I've taken different routes since then, avoiding that stretch of highway. But I can't forget what I saw, or what I didn't see. Last week I was at a truck stop in New Mexico having coffee with some other drivers. An older guy, Jerry, was talking about weird things he'd seen on the road. I mentioned my experience. Jerry went quiet. His face turned pale. "Which rest stop?" he asked. I told him. He nodded slowly. "You're the fourth person I've met who's had something happen there," he said. "All different stories, but always the same details. Screams in the night, fog in the bathroom, writing on the mirror. Started about a year ago." "What happened a year ago?" I asked. "Nothing that made the news," Jerry said. "But there are rumors. Stories about a group of women who disappeared in that area. Their car was found at that rest stop, empty. No bodies ever turned up. I didn't sleep well that night, or many nights since. I keep thinking about those words on the mirror. Help us." Present tense, not past. 2 days ago, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was the sound of dripping water, what might have been breathing. I hung up. The number called back immediately. This time I let it ring. It rang 17 times before it stopped. I've been on the road for most of my adult life. You get used to being alone, and you learn to recognize the strange tricks your mind can play when you're tired. But this wasn't my mind playing tricks. Something happened in that bathroom. Something is still happening there. I don't know what it is, but I know it's real. As real as the condensation that covered everything, despite the bone-dry desert air. As real as the screams that brought me running in the first place. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I'll catch a glimpse of fog in my side mirrors. Just for a second. Then it's gone. I've checked the weather reports for every place it's happened. Clear skies. Low humidity. Every time. I've thought about going back. Part of me feels like I should. Like I left something unfinished that night. But another part of me, the part that remembers the cold metal of that door handle and the moving condensation, knows better. So I keep driving. I stick to the major highways now. The busy truck stops with their bright lights and constant traffic. I don't pull over at the remote rest areas anymore. No matter how tired I am. But I can't stop thinking about it. About the women who disappeared. About the words on the mirror. About what might be trapped there trying to reach out. Last night I woke up in my sleeper cab covered in sweat. The windows were fogged up from the inside. As I watched, 3 words formed in the condensation. "Come back soon." I wiped them away immediately. Started the engine. Drove until sunrise. I'm writing this all down now because I need someone else to know. Need to make some kind of record. The fog is showing up more often in my mirrors. The unknown number calls every few days. And sometimes late at night when I'm driving alone, I hear something that might be screaming. Might be the wind. Might be my imagination. But I don't think it is. I don't know what's happening at that rest stop. I don't know what wants me to come back. But I know it's not finished with me. If you're driving through Arizona and you see a remote rest stop around mile marker 23-7, don't stop. No matter how tired you are or what you hear, keep driving. Don't look in your mirrors. And if you're in a bathroom somewhere, anywhere, You notice the mirrors starting to fog up on a dry night. Run. I've mapped out new routes that keep me at least 200 miles from that rest stop. I've changed my phone number twice. I've installed the dehumidifier in my cab. But every morning, there's still condensation on my windows. Every night I still hear things that might be screams. I keep driving. It's what I've always done. What I'll keep doing until whatever this is either finds me or gives up. I don't think it's going to give up. The fog is getting thicker in my mirrors tonight. The unknown number is calling again. And somewhere out there in a remote rest stop bathroom in the Arizona desert, something is waiting for me to come back. But I won't. I can't. Can I? The beam of my flashlight caught something red, flickering between the trees. A campfire about half a mile ahead through the darkness. I stopped walking and grabbed Tom's sleeve. "You see that?" I asked, pointing the light. We'd been hiking for 6 hours in the Cascade Mountains, and the September night had grown cold enough that my breath made clouds in front of my face. Yeah, weird place for a camp. Tom checked his GPS. No marked sites around here. We were 3 days into what was supposed to be a week-long backpacking trip. The trail had disappeared under fallen trees about 2 hours back, forcing us to navigate by GPS. My shoulders ached from the weight of my pack, and my boots had soaked through from crossing streams. Finding other hikers out here seemed impossible. "Should we check it out?" I asked. "Maybe someone who needs help." Tom shrugged, adjusting his pack. "Worth a look. Getting dark anyway." We left the relatively open forest and pushed through dense underbrush toward the fire. Branches scraped against my Gore-Tex jacket. The light stayed steady, growing larger as we got closer. No voices or movement, just the soft crunch of our boots on fallen leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The flames cast dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. Still no signs of people. My skin prickled. Something felt wrong. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone there?" No response, just the wind and the trees. We reached the edge of a small clearing. The fire pit sat in the center, stones arranged in a perfect circle. Flames about 2 feet high burned steadily, but there was no woodpile nearby. No tent, no gear, nothing to indicate someone had made camp. "This is weird," Tom muttered. He swept his flashlight beam around the clearing. "Fire's too well maintained to be abandoned." I walked closer to the pit, holding my hands out. "There's no heat," I said. My voice came out hoarse. "I can see the flames, but I can't feel anything." Tom crouched down next to the fire. "That's impossible." He reached toward the flames. "Don't touch it." I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. He stumbled to his feet. Okay. This is seriously freaky. Let's get out of here." "Yeah." I backed away from the fire, not taking my eyes off it. "There's a ridge about a quarter mile east. We can make camp up there." We hurried out of the clearing, pushing through the brush faster than was probably safe in the dark. I kept looking over my shoulder, but the fire stayed visible through the trees, still burning steadily. The ridge wasn't much, just a slightly elevated area with fewer trees, but it gave us a decent view of the surrounding forest. We could see the mysterious fire below, a steady orange glow in the darkness. "Let's set up camp," Tom said. His voice had a forced steadiness to it. "I don't know what that was down there, but I don't want to think about it right now." I nodded and shrugged off my pack. We went through the familiar motions of setting up our tent and organizing our gear. The physical activity helped calm my nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We didn't bother with a fire of our own. Neither of us wanted to attract attention. After a quick dinner of trail mix and beef jerky, we crawled into our sleeping bags. Tom fell asleep quickly. He could sleep anywhere. But I lay awake, staring at the tent ceiling. The wind picked up around midnight. Tree branches creaked and scratched against the tent fly. I dozed off eventually, but woke suddenly a few hours later. Something had changed. The wind had stopped. I sat up and unzipped the tent door slowly, trying not to wake Tom. The clearing below was dark. The fire had gone out. My watch showed 3:17. I needed to pee. Normally I just go near the tent, but something made me want to walk a little further away. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the cold night air. I walked about 50 feet from the tent, behind a large Douglas fir. The beam of my flashlight caught movement in the underbrush, probably a rabbit or raccoon. I finished my business quickly, eager to get back in my warm sleeping bag. When I turned around, I saw orange light reflecting off the tent. That was impossible. There hadn't been any light a minute ago. I swung my flashlight beam toward the clearing below. The fire was burning again. "Tom," I hissed, hurrying back to the tent. "Wake up." He groaned and stuck his head out. "What's wrong?" Then he saw the fire. Holy shit. We stood there watching it burn. The flames looked exactly the same as before. Steady, about 2 feet high, no smoke. "We should check it out," I said. "Are you insane?" Tom stared at me. "That's exactly what people in horror movies do right before they die. Something weird is happening. Don't you want to know what it is?" "No, I want to pack up and get out of here as soon as it's light." I kept watching the fire. "I'm going down there. You can stay here if you want." Tom swore under his breath. "Fine, but we're bringing our gear. I'm not leaving anything up here." We packed up quickly, working by flashlight. The fire remained steady below us. This time we approached from uphill, moving as quietly as possible through the undergrowth. The clearing looked exactly the same as before, except for one thing. Our backpacks were sitting next to the fire, neatly arranged side by side. I stopped at the edge of the clearing. "That's impossible. Our packs are on our backs." Tom shrugged his pack off and set it down carefully. "I'm going to walk around the clearing. Maybe there's some explanation we're missing." I watched him circle the area, keeping well back from the fire pit. His flashlight beam showed nothing unusual, just trees, brush, and bare ground. "The packs by the fire," I said. "They look exactly like ours." "They are ours," Tom replied. "Look." He pointed his flashlight at the pack on the left. The small tear in the side pocket where I'd snagged it yesterday was clearly visible. I took my pack off and set it next to Tom's. Now there were 4 identical backpacks, 2 by the fire, 2 at the edge of the clearing. "We need to get those packs," I said. "All our gear is in those. Our gear is right here." Tom gestured to the packs at our feet. "But what if those are our real packs? What if these are the copies?" Tom ran his hands through his hair. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." I took a step toward the fire. Still no heat coming from it. The flames moved in a way that seemed almost artificial, like a video loop. "I'm going to grab them," I said. "Don't. Please." Tom's voice cracked. "Let's just leave. We can replace the gear." I ignored him and walked toward the fire. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The air seemed thicker, heavier. My movements felt sluggish, like walking through water. 5 feet from the fire, I stopped. The packs looked solid enough, but something about them seemed off. The colors were too vivid, the shapes too perfect. I reached out slowly, my hand was shaking. Just before my fingers touched the nearest pack, the fire went out. Complete darkness. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. "Turn on your flashlight," Tom shouted. I fumbled with my lights. When the beam cut through the darkness, the clearing was empty. No fire, no extra packs, just bare ground and scattered leaves. We ran. I don't know how long we ran through the dark forest, crashing through brush, stumbling over roots. Eventually we had to stop, gasping for breath. "What time is it?" Tom wheezed. I checked my watch. The display was blank. We made camp right there, not bothering with the tent. Just laid out our sleeping bags and sat with our backs against a fallen log. Neither of us suggested building a fire. The rest of the night passed slowly. We dozed off occasionally, but jerked away at every sound. As the sky began to lighten, we packed up and started walking. We didn't talk about what had happened. It took us 2 days to reach the trailhead. We hitched a ride back to town with a Forest Service truck. The ranger asked about our trip, and we mumbled something about bad weather. That was 3 months ago. Tom and I don't talk much anymore. He sold all his camping gear and took up golf instead. I kept my gear, but I haven't been back to the mountains. Sometimes at night I wake up thinking I see orange light flickering on my bedroom wall. It's always just passing cars or my neighbor's security light. But I've started noticing other things, small things. Sometimes I can't find items where I know I left them, only to discover them later in plain sight. My coffee cup will be empty when I swear it was half full. The TV will be on a different channel than I remember. Last week I came home from work and found my hiking boots sitting in the middle of the living room floor. They were perfectly clean, like new. But when I checked the closet, my boots were still there, muddy and worn as usual. I threw both pairs away. Tom called yesterday, the first time in months, and said he's been experiencing similar things. Items appearing and disappearing, duplicates of things that can't possibly have duplicates. We're meeting tomorrow to talk about going back to that clearing, not to camp, just a day hike. We need to understand what happened that night. I know it's a bad idea, but I also know we'll keep seeing these things, these impossible duplicates, until we face whatever's waiting for us in that forest. I just hope we can find our way back, and I hope this time we're ready for what we find. I packed my bag for tomorrow, flashlight, water, first aid kit, and the usual day hike gear. But when I went to close the bag, I noticed something strange. There's a faint smell of smoke coming from inside, not regular smoke. It smells like a campfire that isn't really burning. A flat tire light flashed on my dashboard at 2:17 a.m. I was driving through Nevada on Interstate 50, the loneliest road in America. Perfect timing. I pulled into an abandoned rest stop, the only sign of civilization I'd seen in the last 90 minutes. The wooden welcome sign was weathered, its paint peeling. A single flickering light illuminated the empty parking lot. My headlights swept across a boarded-up vending machine building and a restroom structure with a padlocked door. The temperature gauge showed 37 degrees. Late October nights get cold in the high desert. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out to inspect the damage. The rear passenger tire was completely flat. I walked around to check it, shining my light on the rubber. A nail was lodged deep in the tread. Great, at least I had a spare in the trunk. That's when I heard the footsteps. They came from behind me. Slow, deliberate steps on the cracked asphalt. The sound of boots or heavy shoes moving at a steady walking pace. My muscles tensed. I whirled around, sweeping the flashlight beam in an arc. Nothing. The lot was empty except for my car. The footsteps continued getting closer, but there was no one there. I did a full 360-degree turn, heart pounding. The beam caught something on the ground about 20 feet away. Footprints. Fresh ones appearing one after another in the thin layer of desert dust that covered the pavement. They materialized as if someone invisible was walking toward me. I backed up against my car, gripping the flashlight so hard it hurt. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The prints continued forming steady and purposeful. Size 11 or 12 boots from the look of them. They veered left, heading toward the tree line where scraggly pines marked the edge of the rest area. I watched, unable to move as they proceeded into the dirt and pine needles at the forest's edge. Then they simply stopped. My breath came in short bursts, forming clouds in the cold air. I forced myself to think rationally. There had to be an explanation. Maybe someone was playing an elaborate prank. Maybe I was more tired than I realized, and seeing things, I made myself walk over to examine the prints. They were deep and clearly defined in the dust. The treads of work boots, each appearing as if pressed by a substantial weight. I followed them to where they ended at the tree line. Beyond that point, the ground was too rocky and needle-covered to show tracks. The woods were pitch black beyond the reach of my flashlight. The wind sighed through the branches, making them creak. I wasn't about to go investigating in there. I hurried back to my car, my own footsteps sounding unnaturally loud. The spare tire could wait. I'd risk driving on the flat until I found somewhere more populated. But when I tried the ignition, the engine wouldn't turn over. The dashboard was dead. The battery had been fine just minutes ago. I tried again. Nothing. Not even a click. More footsteps were coming from the woods this time. I locked the doors and slid down in the seat, keeping my head below window level. The steps were slower now, more deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Pine needles and gravel under heavy boots. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the window above me. A patch of condensation appeared on the glass, as if something was breathing on it from outside. My hand shaking. I raised the flashlight. The beam showed nothing but empty air where something had to be standing. The door handle rattled. Once, twice. The whole car shook as something pulled on it hard. I grabbed my phone from the center console. No signal. Of course. I was about to throw it down in frustration when I noticed something in its reflection. There was a face in the window, not a clear one. More like a ripple in the air. A heat wave distortion in the shape of human features. But I could make out the suggestion of eyes staring directly at me. I scrambled into the passenger seat, then back, putting as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was out there. The thing moved with me. I could track its progress by the fog of its breath on each window. It made a complete circuit of the car, testing each door. Then it went still. The condensation faded. For 5 minutes, I stayed frozen in the back seat, straining to hear any sound. Nothing but the wind. Slowly, I raised my head to look out. The parking lot was empty. No footprints. No sign of movement. I counted to 100. Still nothing. 200. 300. At 500, I got back in the driver's seat. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely grip the key. I tried the ignition one more time, not expecting anything. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into drive and gunned it, not caring about the flat tire. The rim could be replaced. I just needed to get out of there. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The rest stop was already fading into darkness behind me. Something moved in the back seat. I felt it before I saw it. A sudden cold spot like stepping into a freezer. In the mirror, the air rippled and distorted. The face formed again, clearer this time. It was an older man, maybe 60, with deep-set eyes and weathered skin. He wore old-fashioned clothes, a flannel shirt, a canvas jacket. He looked solid for a moment, then transparent, then solid again. A voice spoke, barely above a whisper. "Pull over." I gripped the steering wheel harder, trying to control my breathing. "No, pull over," louder this time. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Frost started forming on the windows. "What do you want?" "To help." The voice was clearer now, with a slight western drawl. "Your tire. It's dangerous to drive on it." I laughed, a sharp barking sound that surprised even me. "You expect me to believe that after what just happened?" "Sorry about that." The voice actually sounded sheepish. "I'm not good at approaching people. Been a long time since I talked to anyone. Living, that is." I checked the mirror again. He was more solid now, though still slightly transparent. His expression was earnest, almost embarrassed. "I was a mechanic," he continued. "Owned a garage about 20 miles from here. Been helping stranded motorists at this rest stop since I died here in '73. Heart attack, working on some tourist car. Guess I never really left." I kept driving, but slower now. The car was starting to shake from the flat tire. "Look," he said. "I know you've got no reason to trust me, but that rim is about to give out. At least let me help you change the tire. Then I'll go, promise." I considered my options. The rim was making ominous grinding noises, and the nearest town was at least 30 miles away. And if he wanted to harm me, he'd had plenty of chances already. Slowly, carefully, I pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. "Smart choice," he said. "Pop the trunk. It'll show you how to do this right." For the next 20 minutes, I watched as tools floated in midair and the jack seemed to operate itself. Occasionally, the old mechanic's form would become visible as he worked. His movements were quick and practiced. He kept up a running commentary the whole time, explaining each step of the process. His voice grew stronger and more natural the longer he talked. "Always gotta torque the lug nuts in a star pattern," he said, as the wrench moved on its own. "Lots of folks don't know that. Do it wrong and the wheel can work loose." "Why help people?" I asked. "Why not just move on?" He was fully visible now as he lowered the jack. "It's what I did in life. It seemed natural to keep doing it. Besides, this road's dangerous at night. A lot of folks break down out here. Someone's got to look out for them. By scaring them half to death," he chuckled. "Yeah, I know. Still working on my approach. Hard to know how to introduce yourself when you're, dead." He closed the trunk and stepped back. "You're all set. Better get that nail hole patched when you reach town. The spare will get you there fine." I got back in the car. Through the window, I could see him becoming less solid again, fading around the edges. "Thanks," I said, "for the help. Sorry, I ran from you." He smiled, already half transparent. "Don't blame you a bit. You drive safe now." I started the engine. When I looked again, he was gone, but I could have sworn I heard a faint whistle as I pulled back onto the road. An old country tune carried on the desert wind. The rest of my drive was uneventful. I found an all-night garage in the next town and got the tire patched. Didn't mention anything about my roadside assistance. I've driven that stretch of highway many times since then. Sometimes I see the old rest stop in the distance, its single light still flickering. Sometimes I think about stopping just to say hello, but I never do. Some things are better left as they are. A strange encounter on a lonely road. a helpful hand from somewhere, beyond the normal world. Though every now and then when I'm driving late at night and see someone pulled over with car trouble, I think about the old mechanic, and I wonder if maybe, just maybe, they're about to get some unexpected help. I hope he's learned to introduce himself better though, for everyone's sake. The flat tire light still comes on occasionally in my car, but these days it doesn't worry me quite as much as it used to. I know there's at least one mechanic out there still doing his job long after closing time. Just be careful if you break down on that stretch of road, and if you hear footsteps approaching in an empty parking lot, don't run. It might just be someone trying to help, even if their customer service skills are a little rusty. Though I'd still recommend keeping your doors locked, just in case it's not him. After all, he's probably not the only one out there in the dark. The first impact against our tent came at 2:17 a.m. I know because I checked my watch thinking someone was playing a stupid prank. I was wrong, dead wrong. My buddy Dave and I had hiked 8 miles into Black Rock Forest that afternoon. We'd picked a clearing near Pine Creek, far enough from the main trails that we wouldn't get overnight neighbors. The late October air had that sharp bite that made our campfire feel essential rather than just comfortable. We'd done everything by the book. Food in bare canisters. Camp kitchen set up downwind and away from our sleeping area. No snacks in the tent. But nothing in the wilderness survival guides covered what happened that night. The first hit rattled the tent poles. A solid thump against the green ripstop nylon. Dave rolled over in his sleeping bag. "Someone's messing with us," he mumbled. Another impact, harder this time. The tent wall bulged inward before snapping back. "Hey," I shouted. "Cut it out." Silence followed. Just the wind, the pines, and the distant burble of the creek. I lay there, sleeping bag pulled up to my chin, straining to hear footsteps or voices or laughter. Nothing. The watch on my wrist showed 2:19 a.m. when the next hit came. 3 rapid strikes along the side of the tent. Bam, bam, bam. Like someone punching with their fist. But the impacts felt wrong. Too sharp, too focused. That's it. Dave sat up, fumbling for his headlamp. "I'm going out there." I grabbed his arm. "Wait, listen." Something scraped against the tent fabric. A slow, deliberate sound, like dragging a rake through soil, but higher pitched. It moved from one end of the tent to the other. "What the hell is that?" Dave whispered. The scraping stopped at the tent door. We both stared at the zipper, waiting for it to move. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Another impact hit the back of the tent. Dave and I spun around. The nylon rippled from the force. The scraping sound started again, but faster now, more urgent. It circled the tent once, twice, 3 times. Each circuit brought the noise closer to the ground. "Flashlight," I hissed. "Now." Dave clicked on his headlamp. The beam caught the tent wall, showing shadows moving outside, but they weren't human shadows. The proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin. Something heavy pressed against the tent roof, making the poles creak. The nylon stretched downward, forming a deep depression right above us. Dave's headlamp beam shook as his hand trembled. A low sound came from outside. Not quite a growl. Not quite a hiss. It made the hair on my neck stand up and my stomach turn cold. We sat frozen in our sleeping bags as the thing moved across the roof. Its weight made the poles flex and groan. At any moment, I expected them to snap. The pressure vanished. Silence fell again, broken only by our ragged breathing and the hammering of my pulse in my ears. "We need to get out of here," Dave whispered. I shook my head. "If we run, it'll chase us." "How do you know?" "I don't. But I know we can't outrun whatever that is in the dark." More scraping sounds, but distant now, like it was moving through the underbrush around our campsite. Circles again, wider this time. The noise faded, then returned, over and over. I checked my watch, 2:31 a.m. The temperature in the tent had dropped. I could see my breath in Dave's headlamp beam. The circling continued for hours. Sometimes the scraping would stop for 10 or 15 minutes, leaving us in tense silence. Then it would start again, closer or farther away, but always moving around us. We sat back to back, watching opposite sides of the tent. Dave's headlamp battery started to fade around 4 a.m. The beam grew yellower and dimmer. Neither of us dared move to get fresh batteries from our packs. The sky began to lighten at 5:47 a.m. I watched the tent walls slowly brighten from black to gray. The scraping sounds had stopped about 20 minutes earlier, but we didn't trust the silence. Birds started their morning calls, a good sign. If something dangerous was still out there, they'd stay quiet. "I think it's gone," I said. My voice was hoarse from hours of tense silence. Dave nodded. His shoulders stayed rigid against my back. We waited another 30 minutes, watching the tent get brighter. No more sounds came from outside. No impacts, no scraping, just normal forest noises. "We should look," Dave said finally. Yeah. Neither of us moved. "It'll go first," I said, reaching for the zipper. My hand shook so badly I could barely grip it. I pulled the zipper down 1 inch at a time, ready to yank it shut at any sound or movement. Cool morning air flowed in through the widening gap. The clearing looked normal at first glance. Our packs still hung from the bare line between 2 pines. The fire pit held cold ashes, dew-coated everything in tiny droplets. I stuck my head out, looking left and right. Nothing moved except branches swaying in the breeze. "Clear," I said, crawling out. My legs felt weak after hours of sitting tensed and ready to run. Dave followed me out. We stood beside the tent, scanning the trees. The forest looked exactly like it had when we'd gone to bed. Then I saw the tracks. They circled our tent in overlapping loops, pressed deep into the soft ground. Each print was nearly 2 feet long and a foot wide. 4 toes with deep claw marks at the tips. The claws had cut grooves 3 inches into the soil. "Look at the tent," Dave said. Long gashes ran through the ripstop nylon, starting near the roof and raking downward. The cuts were clean and precise, like someone had drawn them with a ruler. In some places they went through both the rainfly and the inner tent wall. I walked around the tent, counting 37 sets of claw marks. Some barely broke the surface, others went deep enough that I could stick my finger through. "The bear canisters," Dave said suddenly. We ran to check them. Both sat exactly where we left them, sealed tight. No signs of tampering. "Not a bear then," I said. "No shit." We found more tracks leading into and out of the clearing. They came from the north, circled our campsite hundreds of times based on the overlapping prints, then led off to the south. I followed the tracks to the tree line. They continued into the forest, cutting a straight line through the underbrush. Broken branches and scraped bark marked their path. "We should pack up," Dave said behind me. I nodded, still staring into the trees. The morning sun cast long shadows through the branches. Any one of them could hide something watching us. We broke camp in record time, stuffing gear into our packs without bothering to organize it. The shredded tent went in last. Maybe we could repair it, but I doubted either of us would want to use it again. The hike out felt 10 times longer than the hike in. We kept checking over our shoulders, studying every shadow and movement in the trees. Neither of us spoke. We just walked as fast as we could without running. We reached the trailhead parking lot at 9:23 a.m. Dave's truck sat alone in the gravel, covered in frost. We threw our packs onto the bed and got in. The engine started on the first try. As we pulled out of the lot, I looked back at the forest. The morning sun made it look peaceful and inviting, but I knew what was out there now, something that walked on 2 legs but wasn't human. Something with claws that could slice through ripstop nylon like paper. Something that hunted at night, circling its prey for hours. Dave drove 10 miles over the speed limit all the way home. Neither of us suggested stopping for breakfast. We just wanted distance between us and Black Rock Forest. I still go camping sometimes, but never in Black Rock. Never without checking the weather report for the phase of the moon. That night had been 3 days before full, when the light was bright enough to cast shadows, but dark enough to hide in them. The claw marks on that tent taught me something. The wilderness isn't empty. Things live out there that don't appear in any guidebook or wildlife manual. Things that know how to hunt, how to stalk, how to terrify their prey. Sometimes I wake up at night and check my watch. If it's 2:17 a.m., I lie there in the dark, listening, waiting to hear that scraping sound against my bedroom wall. So far it hasn't come, but I keep listening, because I know it's out there somewhere, circling in the night, leaving tracks that shouldn't exist, and claw marks that can't be explained. Dave sold his camping gear and moved to Chicago. He says he sleeps better in the city, surrounded by concrete and steel and artificial light. Sometimes I think about joining him, but I stay, because someone needs to remember what happened that night. Someone needs to warn others about what lives in those woods. and someone needs to be ready, watching and listening, in case those tracks ever lead out of the forest and into civilization. I keep the shredded tent in my garage. When doubt creeps in, when I start to think maybe it was just a bear or a mountain lion or my imagination, I take it out and run my fingers over those precise, methodical claw marks. They remind me that the world is bigger and stranger and more dangerous than we want to believe. Last week I read about some hikers finding similar tracks in a state park 50 miles north of Black Rock Forest. The newspaper called it a hoax, said someone made the prints with fake claws and photoshopped the pictures, but I know better. I know what made those tracks, and I know it's getting closer. Tomorrow, I'm buying a game camera and some motion sensors. Next weekend, I'll set them up along the northern border of town. Maybe I'll catch something on film. Maybe I'll get proof. Or maybe I'll just add more evidence to the pile of unexplained phenomena that people ignore because the truth is too frightening to face. Either way, I'll be ready, and I'll keep watching, because something tells me that night in Black Rock Forest wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the beginning. Dave called yesterday. He said he's been hearing strange sounds outside his apartment at night. Scraping sounds, coming from 20 stories up. I told him to pack his bags and head south. Whatever that thing is, it hasn't forgotten us. And sooner or later it's gonna stop circling and start hunting. But this time we'll be ready. This time we know what's out there. And this time we won't be the prey. The first knock came at 3:47 a.m. 3 sharp raps against the wall. Clear enough to jolt me from my restless sleep in my hotel room. Room 23A. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd imagined it. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I rolled over and pressed my ear against the wall. The knocking stopped, but there was something else. A scraping sound, like furniture being dragged across carpet. My business trip to Chicago had been uneventful until now. The lakefront hotel was just another generic high-rise with beige walls and corporate artwork. I checked in yesterday afternoon, attended my meetings, and planned to fly home tomorrow. Nothing special. The wall vibrated with 3 more knocks, harder this time. I sat up, checking my phone, 3:52 a.m. The sounds were definitely coming from room 2317 next door. I got out of bed, pulled on my jeans, and walked to my door. The hallway was empty and silent, lit by dim wall sconces. I stood outside room 2317 and pressed my ear to the door. More scraping than a thud, like something heavy falling. I knocked on the door. Hello? Everything okay in there? No response. Just more scraping. The front desk would know who was in there. I walked to the elevator, rode down 23 floors to the lobby. The night clerk looked up from his computer. A guy in his 20s with thick glasses. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yeah, there's some strange noises coming from room 2317 next to mine. Could you check who's staying there?" He typed on his keyboard, frowning. "That's odd. Room 2317 is vacant tonight." "Are you sure?" I clearly heard knocking and moving furniture. Let me double check. More typing. "Yes, definitely vacant. Has been for 3 days. Housekeeping cleaned it yesterday morning. But I heard, would you like me to send security to check?" "Yes, please." We rode up together. Me, the clerk, whose name tag read Mike, and a security guard named Curtis. The sounds had stopped by the time we reached room 2317. Curtis knocked firmly on the door. "Hotel security. Is anyone in there?" Silence. He used his key card. The lock clicked. Curtis pushed the door open, hand on his radio. The room was dark. Curtis flipped on the lights. The bed was a mess. Sheets twisted and pulled half off. Pillows scattered on the floor. The desk chair overturned. Drawers hung open. "What the hell?" Mike muttered. Curtis did a quick sweep. Empty bathroom. Empty closet. No one there. I noticed something on the desk. A small black notebook. I picked it up before Curtis could stop me. A diary filled with rushed handwriting. August 15, checked in for conference. Room seems fine. Typical business hotel. August 16, strange sounds in walls at night. Like scratching. Probably pipes. August 17, scratching getting louder. Asked front desk to check room above. They say it's empty. August 18, can't sleep. Sounds are constant now. Not pipes. More like movement. August 19, they're watching. I see shadows under the door. When I open it, no one's there. The final entry was dated today, written in shaky letters. They're here, in the walls, behind the mirrors, watching, always watching. Have to get out. They're coming. There. Sir, please, don't touch anything else, Curtis said, taking the diary. We need to document this. My hands were shaking. Someone was clearly staying here. How is it listed as vacant? Mike checked his tablet. The system shows no record of any guest in 2317 this month. Last checkout was July 30. Curtis radioed for his supervisor. Soon the room was full of hotel staff, management, more security and maintenance checking the walls and ventilation. They offered to move me to a different room. I declined. I needed to know what was happening next door. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed listening. The wall remained silent. I checked my phone. It was 5:13 a.m. No way I was getting back to sleep. Around 6 a.m., voices and movement next door. Staff still investigating. I showered, dressed, and packed my bag. My flight wasn't until evening, but I planned to work from the lobby today. At the elevator, I ran into Curtis. Have you found anything? He shook his head. No signs of forced entry. No evidence anyone used their key card on that door in weeks. Camera footage shows no one entering or leaving. The diary is with hotel security now. What about hotel records? Previous guests. Management is checking, but nothing unusual so far. I spent the day in the lobby, alternating between work emails and watching people come and go. The staff avoided eye contact with me. Around 2 p.m. I saw Mike ending his shift, looking exhausted. Any updates on 23 and 17? I asked. Management says to refer all questions to hotel security, he replied mechanically. I rode up to the 23rd floor one last time before leaving. The door to 23 and 17 was sealed with security tape. As I packed my room, the wall remained silent. At checkout, I asked to speak with the hotel manager. She arrived quickly. Sarah Chen, according to her name card. Mr. Roberts, I understand your concern about last night's incident, she said. I want to assure you we're conducting a thorough investigation. What about the diary? The person who wrote it? We're reviewing all security footage and records. The police have been notified as a precaution. I'm afraid I can't share more details at this time. I had more questions, but my ride to O'Hare was waiting. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the exit, Sarah called after me. Mr. Roberts, I apologize for any disruption to your stay. We've comped your room charges. The ride to the airport was a blur. I kept thinking about those diary entries, the increasingly desperate words, the messed up room, and the lack of any record showing occupancy. I was through security and at my gate when my phone buzzed, an email from an address I didn't recognize. Thank you for finding my diary. They almost had me, but I got out in time. Be careful, they're watching you now too. From 2041 Sedanine, I deleted the email immediately and checked the sender. The account didn't exist. My phone buzzed again, with an unknown number. Don't delete my messages. You need to understand. Look behind you. I spun around, hundreds of travelers rushing past, but no one paying attention to me. Another buzz. Not there. In the reflection, I turned toward the window. In the dim glass, I saw my own face. And behind me, a shadow, a figure standing too close. I whirled around again. No one was there. My hands were sweating. I shut off my phone and asked the gate agent to switch me to an earlier flight. Anything to get out of Chicago faster. On the plane, I kept my window shade down, didn't look at any reflective surfaces, and didn't turn my phone back on until I was home. That was 3 days ago. I've been trying to convince myself it was all some elaborate prank, a hoax by hotel staff, mass hallucination, anything rational. But last night, I heard it, 3 sharp knocks on my bedroom wall. I live in a single-family house. That wall is exterior. When I shine a light out my window, there's nothing there. But sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I catch movements in mirrors, shadows that shouldn't exist. My phone keeps getting texts from numbers that don't exist. They followed you home. We're in your walls now, always watching. I've checked my entire house, replaced mirrors, changed my phone number twice, but they keep finding ways to reach me. The knocking comes every night now. Always at 3:47 a.m. Sometimes I think I hear scraping in the walls. Movement where there shouldn't be any. I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know what happened, what started in room 2317. The diary I found was a warning. Now I understand what that guest was trying to tell us. They're here again. I can feel them watching through the mirrors, through my screens. Always watching. I have to keep moving. I have to get out before they find me.